Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. We cover the stories both big and small, the epic and the cute, the silly and the tragic. I hope you all enjoy the ride, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. After the main campaign against Garlean had shifted in Alamigo's favor, allowing them to gain their freedom and get brought into the Eorzean alliance, plans get made to infiltrate Garlean itself and reveal the truth of how the Ascians built up the nation and have been using it to their own ends. But before these plans can be finalized, the Scions all get hit by a strange mental attack, and the Warrior of Light hears a voice warning that what they intend to do will lead to disaster if history isn't changed, and the only person who can stop it is you. All of the Scions hear a voice that no one else can, but when it fades, Thancred collapses. His vital signs are stable and no one knows what happened to him, but they can't wake him up. The other Scions felt like something was pulling on their mind, but the Warrior of Light felt like she was being taken somewhere else entirely. Connie Senna thinks your soul was being pulled out of your body and called to another place. If her guess is right, that's why Thancred can't wake up, because his soul was taken out of him entirely. The reason he dropped first was likely because of the changes brought to his body when he was possessed by La Habrea, and whenever who or what it is tried to summon you all, his body and soul split. Whatever it is that's trying to summon you is extremely powerful, and Connie Senna thinks that they'll definitely try again. And it does happen again. Next to Y'shtola and Urianger, then to Alphinaud and Alisaie, before it finally happens to you at the worst possible time, right in the middle of your battle with Elidibus in Xenos' body. Your soul is pulled away into a dimension between worlds where a hooded man immediately tells you that he's not your enemy, and whether you win or lose your fight, it'll still lead to the end of everything. However, if you come to him, he says that he can help fix things, but he'll need your strength to do it. Strength he's probably not going to get since you were one sword swipe away from being killed when he called you. He lets you know that the battle is over, and you were saved by Estinian. What he needs you to do is go to the Crystal Tower. He left an item there that you need to find so he can use it to fully guide you to him on the first. Because you're sure that it's the only way to find out what happened to your friends, when you wake up, Tataru and the remaining Scions along with members of the Garlean Ironworks gather at the Crystal Tower. With so many people searching, it doesn't take long for you to find a strange object with the Garlean Ironworks symbol on it, something that Wedge assumes to be a fake since he's never seen the thing before. Fake or not, it does seem to be just the object the hooded man left for you, because when you touch it, the voice in your head calls out that he's got you and begins to drag you to him. You're pulled out of your world and into the first, the world where the warriors of darkness who had tried to kill you came from. You wake in a brightly lit forest with a serious headache where you run into a peddler by a campfire who asks you why you're out at this time of night. A strange question considering how it's his brightest day, but apparently the sun never sets on the first. There hasn't been a single night in 100 years. The peddler lets you know how to get to the nearest town, but it'll be kinda hard to miss the giant crystal tower at the Crystarium, so you really shouldn't have needed a guide. When you reach the settlement, you're stopped and questioned by a guard since she recognizes every face in the city, but she has no idea who you are. She's never heard of the place you claim you're from, so she thinks you're either a liar or someone planning something devious. Either way, she refuses to let you in the city, but her attention is drawn away when a strange white-winged creature attacks. She deals with it, and when it breaks apart, it leaves behind a ring that you saw in the peddler's hand. Apparently, the thing had seen him first and ate him. Poor guy. The robed man who summoned you shows up after having heard the commotion, a man who they call the Crystal Exarch. He tells the guard that you're his guest, so he takes you into the city and offers to answer any of your questions once you're both somewhere private. When he summoned you, he had tried to bring you straight to him, but he missed by a few miles, which is why you landed in the middle of the woods. He confirms that you are indeed on the first, and since most people don't know anything about other worlds and such, they'll all think you're crazy if you run around telling them where you came from. Since he's the leader of the people at the Crystarium, he had decided to get help from you and the Scions to fix the first, a world that has nearly been devoured by light ether. 100 years ago, a flood of light swallowed 90% of the entire world. Even though some people weren't consumed, that didn't make them safe since the light turned the people and animals trapped inside of it into creatures like the one who ate the peddler. They called them Sin Eaters. Those creatures are the reason the Exarch summoned you and the others. He wanted to save the first from them. He's well aware of the fact that you have work to do on the source, but he believes that saving the first will save the source as well. He wants to finish the conversation after you learned a bit more about the situation, so he sends you to meet a few other important people around the Crystarium, and if they ask where you're from, just say the same place as the Exarch, since people tend to avoid trying to learn more about their mysterious leader. You meet a few interesting people like Morin at the Cabinet of Curiosity, who tells you about the history of the First, which is a little different than you might expect. 100 years ago, a group of evildoers called the Warriors of Light killed the Shadowkeeper who served the darkness. That act caused Light Ether to run rampant across the world in a calamity known as the Flood of Light. It left the planet a barren wasteland until the Oracle of Light appeared and stopped the flood, leaving Novrant untouched by the wave of destruction. While people celebrated, out of the destroyed land, now called the Empty, came the Sin Eaters, and where they went, the night sky vanished as they hunted for survivors of the flood. You also learn the history of the Crystarium, and the city was founded after the Crystal Exarch summoned the Crystal Tower out of thin air and allowed refugees from the flood and Sin Eater attacks to use it for shelter. Since the magic kept the Eaters away, it was a good place to be, and eventually the city was built around the tower. The city's been there for decades, but the Exarch hasn't aged a day. After your tour is over, you meet up with the Exarch, who tells you that the Crystal Tower is in fact the one from your world that he teleported there. He summoned it as practice so he could see if he could move things across worlds, which seems a little bit backwards since you'd think he would start with something small like an apple or a lalafell, but to each his own. He doesn't know what time period he pulled the tower from, but it was what got everything started. You follow him into the tower to his study so you can talk without people eavesdropping. He doesn't want them to worry about the danger that they're in. Firstly, he lets you know that all of your friends are on the First and they are alive. However, time flows a little differently on the First, so what was an hour for you on the Source could have been a year on the First, or the same thing could be in reverse. There's no way to predict when the changes will come, but from what the Exarch can tell, the two worlds should be moving at the same time for now, so you don't have to worry about going home and finding out that all of your friends died of old age, or your house got demoed because you didn't go in it before the deadline. That being said, Thancred has been on the First for 5 years, Urianger and Y'shtola have been there for 3, and the twins have been there for 1. Ironically enough, the Exarch had only been trying to summon you, but he grabbed your friends by mistake, which is why only their souls were brought over. They may look and move like they have their bodies, but they don't, which means that unlike you, they can't go back and forth between the two worlds. The Scions are trapped on the First. When they first got there, the Exarch had spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to send them back, but after Urianger told them about a vision he had when he came through the rift, they stopped. He had seen a future where the First and the Source merged, causing the 8th Umbral Calamity, killing millions, including the Scions and you. After that, the Scions all set out to find a way to stop the calamity, and they figured out that getting rid of the Sin Eaters will save both worlds. But you should find them first so you can hear all of this from them, because the Exarch did kidnap you, so trusting him is a little bit difficult. He has a rough idea of where they might be, and while you seek them out, he'll keep working on finding a way to send them safely home. But you should rest first, since traveling between worlds is hard on the body, and the First is definitely not a place you want to travel when you aren't at 100%. While your room gets ready, the Exarch takes you around the city and introduces you to a pixie named Feo Ul, who can take things back and forth from the First to the Source. And since the pixie finds you interesting, Feo agrees to take on the job, after claiming you and labeling you his adorable sapling. After making a pact, Feo sends a message back to Tataru to let her know that you survived your trip. With that done, you head into your room to get some rest, even though that'll be a little hard since the sun never goes down. And even harder when the ghost of Ardbert, the warrior of darkness who tried to kill you to save his world, appears in your room. When he realizes that you can see him, he's super excited since it's been a long time since anyone has been able to see him. He reminds you that him and his friends had caused the flood and teamed up with the Ascians in a hope to fix it, which led to them being beaten by you and brought back home by Minfilia. Minfilia and the other warriors of darkness died stopping the flood and left Ardbert behind to wander the world alone for 100 years, unable to touch anything or talk to anyone. That's a pretty terrible fate for someone who fought to save the world. He was fading away when all of a sudden he was in the room with you, wondering why you could see him and why you were even there in the first place. When you tell him you were summoned to save the First, he thinks it's a waste of time. The world is beyond saving, but since you're there and you can see him, maybe following you around can help him figure out why he was left behind while the others faded away. Maybe then he could bring an end to his tortured existence. But he warns you that the First has claimed many heroes, and if you aren't careful, you'll likely be next. When he leaves, the Warrior of Light finally gets some sleep to prepare for the very, very long and difficult journey ahead. After the Warrior of Light wakes from her nap, she heads back to the Exarch to move forward with the task of tracking down the Scions. He whips out a map to give you a view of all the surrounding lands that haven't been destroyed by the flood, so he can point out where your friends are located. Urianger is to the north in the fairy kingdom of Il Mheg. Y'shtola is to the east in the land that once held the civilization of Rak'tika, two places that aren't all that easy to reach. Alisaie and Alphinaud are a lot closer. Alphinaud is on the island of Kalusia, near the city of Eulmore, a place that only allows the rich and powerful to live in it. He went there to try to form an alliance to work against the Sin Eaters, but who knows how well that's going. Alisaie is in the south in Ohrani, right on the edge of where the flood had been stopped. The place is constantly under attack by Sin Eaters, so it's only right that you'd find her in the most dangerous of places. She wanted to learn more about the monsters, so she's been hiring herself out as a bodyguard for anyone who needs her. Thancred is a little more difficult to find since he's been wandering around with a new friend, taking down Sin Eaters all over the place. The Warrior of Light decides to go after Alisaie first, because she had been distraught when she'd been snatched away. Apparently she'd made that fact known to the Exarch, and he hopes sending you to her will make her forgive him at least a little bit. He gives you a letter for a merchant named Cassard who will be pointing you in the right direction. Cassard gives you a ride out to the desert outpost and lets you know that Alisaie has been staying at the inn at Journey's Head, but he's got some business to take care of at Mord Soup before he can take you there. The place is another refuge for people who were displaced by the flood. Cassard introduces you to a few of the Mord who are just kobolds, and tells you that if you want the people to trust you, you have to spend a bit of money. The Exarch sent a bit to cover your expenses, and when Cassard whips it out, the people swarm you wanting you to spend it with them. Since they know you're loaded, you become an instant friend. After trying some food and nearly dying, Cassard sends you with Tesleen, who not only knows where Alisaie is, but she's already heard a lot about you. She's more than happy to bring you to the inn. The place is a bit more run down than other inns you've seen. In fact, it's more of a hole in a mountain wall than an inn at all. It's where people who have been infected by Sin Eaters and the people who take care of them stay. And Alisaie, of course, who at the moment is out scouting around for Sin Eaters to stab, so you head out to track her down. You spot a Sin Eater flying around before you see Alisaie jump off of a plateau that definitely should have killed her before she shows off her Red Mage skills and takes the creature down. Red Mage is the best mage, so I can understand why she chose that job. She's happy to see you, but she does wish you had made it there sooner. You fill her in on how things have gone on the source with the war, and she wants nothing more than to go back home. But even if she could, she wouldn't until she dealt with the Sin Eaters. While the regular Sin Eaters are dangerous, the stronger ones can affect your ether and cause you to transform into one of them yourself. Once the change starts, there's no stopping it as far as they know, and once it's done, you become a mindless beast fueled only by hunger for ether. They're even worse than Voidson in the way that you can't even make a pact with them. They don't listen to reason, they just eat ether. The people who are infected are sent away to die or turn alone in the land near where the flood stopped. It's been a good place for Alisaie to learn about the Eaters and practice fighting them, both the ones that show up and the people who turn. That's knowledge that she shares with you while you're on patrol with her. When you finish and return to the inn, Tesleen tells you how much Alisaie talked about you, something she denies in typical Alisaie fashion. She sends the two of you to Mord Soup to gather supplies, and after you get them, Alisaie takes you up a hill so you can see the large crack in the wall of light. It lets you see the land beyond that had been destroyed by the flood. The Empty, a place where the light ether is so strong that it'll start to kill you just by standing in it for too long. There's nothing she can do about that, any more than she can help Halric, the little boy who's been infected by a Sin Eater and staying at the inn, the one who's probably going to turn any day now. In a normal world, people's ether would return to normal over time, but with the First being the way that it is, their ether steadily moves in the opposite direction until they become Sin Eaters. Even though Tesleen and the others know this, they still try to make the people at the inn comfortable until it's time to put them down, usually by putting poison in their favorite food. It's sad really, but there's nothing to be done. But that doesn't mean Alisaie doesn't plan on trying. Back at the inn, Tesleen prepares dinner for everyone, but she notices that Halric is gone, which is strange since his infection is so advanced that he doesn't do much of anything. With so many Sin Eaters in the area, you need to find him fast, especially since a really big one with a sword flies overhead. The thing looks so dangerous that Alisaie decides it should be taken down before it kills anyone, so the two of you follow it only to see it flying right at Halric. It goes in to kill him, but Tesleen attacks it only to get run through by its sword. Then in a horribly gruesome scene, she transforms into a Sin Eater right in front of your eyes. This was probably one of the creepiest things I've seen in a while, especially with the way Halric just stares at her, his face void of all emotion as she screams in agony while her body contorts and mutates. When the transformation is done, she flies off after her murderer while using her last words to apologize to Alisaie. After losing her friend, Alisaie decides to head back to the Crystarium to discuss a plan for wiping the Sin Eaters out entirely. Since she's back, you head out to Kalusia to track down Alphinaud. You hitch a ride on an Amaro out to Kalusia and catch sight of the city of Eulmore off in the distance. In the past, it was an ally to the Crystarium in the fight against the Sin Eaters, but over the years the elite of the city labeled themselves the Masters of the First and offer protection to other settlements if they submit to their will. And the things they ask their subordinates to do are a bit insane sometimes. The Crystarium, of course, refuses to bow down to them, and while the two nations aren't at war exactly, they're not friends anymore. Meaning you shouldn't let people know that you're friends with the Exarch while you're there. They may cause themselves to die by trying to mess with you. The Exarch has a spy named Ivor who lives in the area and watches things, so he should be able to help you find Alphinaud. When you find him, he lets you know where the young Ellison should be, so you head to the spot and wait. As luck would have it, Alphinaud does show up there after not too long. He's happy to see you since it's been so long, and after the two of you get caught up, he brings up Urianger's vision and what needs to be done to change it. The way he described all of your deaths seems a lot like they used the bioweapon of Black Rose. Since Alphinaud saw the effects firsthand when he traveled with Gaius, he's well aware of how dangerous the weapon would be if used, and if it got out of control, it could in fact kill everyone. Working with the Exarch, Alphinaud and the others have come up with a theory on how the Rejoining might get started. It requires both the Source and the First to be on the brink of destruction, and with the Sin Eater threat on the First, one of the worlds is already pretty close to being wiped out. Alphinaud refuses to sit by and let people suffer at the hands of the monsters, which is why he came to Eulmore. While the people may be unpleasant, it is a seat of power. There has to be something inside of the city that can help figure out what to do. But you can't just walk in. It'll take a bit of work, but Alphinaud is excited to once again be doing some adventuring with you. Despite being in Kalusia for so long, he's yet to make it into the city. Together the two of you head out so he can show you exactly why. While you walk, you hear an old lady scream. She's getting attacked by a Sin Eater, but lucky for her, you get there in time to save her. She doesn't want to leave her house, and she doubts the people of Eulmore would actually let someone her age in, but she would be safer trying with all of the Sin Eater attacks around where she lives. A lot of people have abandoned their homes to live outside of Eulmore, since there aren't many people around with the strength to fight off the creatures. Even though the area isn't nearly as dangerous as Almarang, it still has more than enough of the creatures to kill anyone who isn't prepared. Alphinaud takes you to a place called Gate Town right outside of Eulmore, where people live with the hope of being chosen to enter the city. Lucky for you, two oddly dressed women show up with bags of food to announce what type of person they want in the city right when you get there. Apparently a rich woman has a taste for some top-notch seafood, so they're out looking for a master culinarian who can do the job. On a side note, these two ladies remind me of Queen Braun's attendants Zorn and Thorn from Final Fantasy IX, which, considering how the leader of Eulmore is about the same size as Princess Garnet's mother, that may have been what they were going for. Apparently Eulmore is also known as the City of Final Pleasures, where the rich gather to live in luxury during the rest of their lives while they ignore everything else that happened in the world. It's basically Las Vegas if only rich people were allowed to live there, and the only way average people could get through the gates is if they were entertainment. They did at least bring food for the people, so there is that. It's called Mio, and the way the people acted when they started handing it out means it must be delicious. But the fact that the selfish citizens of Eulmore give the Mio out to the peasants so freely makes Alphinaud a little uneasy. All the more reason to figure out a way to get into that city so you can find out exactly what goes on in there. Of course, Alphinaud's been working on a plan to get inside because there's no way he would have sat around for all this time doing nothing. He reached out to the Ondo, a nearby beast tribe, and found out that they really like fruits grown on the surface, and they're willing to trade them for pearls. The return on investment would be phenomenal, so any Eulmoran lord would love to get in on that deal once it's finalized, and he is doing that in just a few hours. And of course he wants you to come with him. While you head off to go pick up the supplies for the meeting, you miss the fact that someone was hiding behind a building eavesdropping. When you go to pick up the produce for the Ondo trade, you find out that your eavesdropping friend has already picked up your stuff, claiming that he worked for you. After the woman describes him, it doesn't take long for you to track him down. The two of you hunt down the young Mheg, but instead of beating him up and taking your stuff back, you listen to his sob story. His name is Kashir, and he's desperate to get into the city. All of his friends are already inside, and he doesn't have anyone else. He's not even been able to get the Miol when it's handed out. Since he has no real talent of his own, he figured if he stole Alphinaud's idea, then that would be enough to get him into the city. He could of course go to the Crystarium, but since his friends are all in Eulmore, he doesn't want to go anywhere else. Being the guy who always tries to help everyone else, Alphinaud decides to not only let Kashir take his idea, he explains it all to him. Of course that means the two of you will have to come up with another way to get into the city. The two of you start to head back to the town where you found Alphinaud so you can come up with a plan, when he spots a man sprawled out near the shoreline looking half dead. You rush over to him to find out that he's still alive, but barely. He was an artist in Eulmore, brought in by a couple that wanted pictures painted of them, but they didn't like his style, so they fired him, leaving him broken without a patron. Lord Vauthry, the leader of the city, asked him what did he plan on doing to fix the situation. Since he had no ideas, he offered to leave the city, so Vauthry threw him over the side. He only survived by pure luck, and to make matters worse, the people of the city didn't see anything wrong with what Vauthry did. They go along with anything he says without complaint, no matter how cruel it is. This only makes Alphinaud more determined to get into the city, and since you saved him, Crystal is more than willing to help you do it, even though he wouldn't want to send his worst enemy behind those walls. The people of Eulmore always get what they want, and what they want is an artist, so they won't stop until they get one. Crystal gives Alphinaud his favorite paintbrush because if you show up with such a high quality tool, you might be able to trick them into thinking you can paint well enough to be brought inside of their walls. But Alphinaud doesn't have to pretend to be good at art. You saw how well he drew Gosetsu and Yugiri when you hunted for them in Kugane, and Ishtola was adamant about not having him draw his very detailed pictures of her returning from being lost in the ether since she popped out completely naked, something he said he would never forget. So since he's more than talented enough to play the part, he may be able to get the both of you in if you're willing to play the role of his assistant. Of course the Warrior of Light is willing to go along with the plan, so all that's left to do is wait for the two weird clown ladies to come back. When they show up, they do call for a painter, and Alphinaud convinces them to let the two of you in, although they do call you a parasite that'll probably get thrown out by Alphinaud's new bosses. After they hand out the Miol, you all head into the very beautiful city of Eulmore. The first thing you have to do is register so they can have records of who you are and why you're there to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and to make it easy to hunt you down if you're not. The immigration officer gives you a quick rundown of how things go in the city. There are two types of citizens. The free are the ones who have Vauthry's favor and can do whatever they want. The bonded are the ones who work for the free, performing the duty they were hired for. If you get fired, you'll need to find another free to sponsor you or work as a general laborer. Your patrons are Chinus and Dulia Chai. They're nice people, but the officer recommends that you be respectful and humble for your own sake, which doesn't make the couple sound all that nice at all. Once your paperwork's done, you're sent to the registrations office. This whole process is a lot like a trip to the DMV, but at least it is a little bit faster. The clerk sees your documents are in order, so you're good to go, except for the fact that the two of you smell like you've been rolling through the sewers in the summertime. Before she sends you anywhere else, the woman sends you straight to the showers, then tells you to be sure to douse yourselves in perfume after you scrub the decaying corpse smell from your body. After that, you'll be able to head to meet the Chais. With the bath done, you're sent to finally meet your patrons in the dining area in the city, and while Alphinaud has a bit of tact, the Warrior of Light has a hard time not staring at Dulia Chai, who is the first fat Mheg she's ever seen. She finds Alphinaud to be adorable, and she loves how he smells, although they find it strange that he brought someone in who wasn't a family member. But honestly, the two of you pretty much are family, so he couldn't possibly have left you behind. Dulia finds his devotion to you so touching that she gives you permission to explore the city while he paints, and her husband agrees because she said so. Clearly she wears the pants in their family. You explore the city, learning your way around while Alphinaud works. Of course, the first thing Dulia does is have him change into clothes that she likes better, which doesn't have anything to do with painting. But if she takes pleasure in dressing Alphinaud like her personal doll, then her husband is fine with it. This is Eulmore, and whatever the free citizens want, they get. Eventually she does get around to letting him draw. However, the extra time you have exploring lets you learn that there are some strange things going on in the city. Vauthry seems to have influence over the Sin Eaters, which is why he's in charge. And there's talk of something called the Ascension, where people are brought to paradise. It makes you wonder where this so-called paradise is. All of this leaves you with a lot to think about, but while Dulia isn't overly concerned about her portrait being completed, Chinoo's is, and when he sees the sketch Alphinaud has made, he's not happy with it, despite the drawing being very accurate. The man doesn't want a realistic picture, he wants you to make them look good. He tells Alphinaud to start over, but a scream from within the city causes everyone to stop. A horn sounds and the two clowns who brought you into the city come running out saying that there's a criminal on the loose, and Vauthry is about to dispense justice that everyone is invited to see. Under normal circumstances, the bonded wouldn't be allowed to watch, but since the rule has been lifted for now, you and Alphinaud join the crowd to see just what Vauthry is going to do. Vauthry is a disgusting looking man who has a lot of large sin eaters that seems to act as his servants, while he stares down at a man bleeding on the floor in front of him. The criminal that everyone was talking about turns out to be Kaishir, the Mikote who you helped get into the city. Alphinaud questions why Vauthry has him on the floor, and the leader of Eulmore says that it's because he's a fraud. He claimed to be a businessman, but he proved himself to be a liar, which means he doesn't belong in the city. He ordered the man to throw himself off of the side to atone, but Kaishir begged for mercy. Since he considers himself to be a merciful ruler, he offered Kaishir another way to atone for his sins. The Sin Eaters are part of Eulmore, but they need living ether to survive, so he ordered Kaishir to cut off a part of his own body to feed the creatures, but the boy failed to do even that. Alphinaud can understand why he'd be sent away for lying, but to kill him or torture him seems harsh, but the people around don't even seem to care. Vauthry, however, feels that since he can control the Sin Eaters and provide safety for the people, however, he decides to dole out justice is fair, and those words bring a cheer from the crowd. The Warrior of Light moves to attack the man, a move that would have probably gotten her killed to be honest, but Alphinaud stops her. He goes to heal Kaishir before insulting Vauthry and walking out. It takes him a moment to realize that he'd been insulted, which causes him to throw quite a temper tantrum while the citizens of Eulmore look on in silence. You all walk out of the city where, realizing that you won't find allies in Eulmore, Alphinaud decides to come to the Crystarium with you. Kaishir is done taking charity and plans on figuring out how to survive on his own. Surprisingly, the Chais followed you out of the city. Dulia saw Alphinaud's portrait and she loved it. She wants him to come back, and she's willing to help sort things out with Vauthry, but he's not coming back, not until he can fix the corruption in the city. Back in the Crystarium with the Exarch and the twins, the time has come to work on the task of getting rid of the Sin Eaters, and while it may look hopeless, there is a way to do it. There's a hierarchy among the Sin Eaters, and the weaker ones serve the strongest, the Sin Eaters known as the Lightwardens. And there aren't very many of them. If you take them out, the lesser Sin Eaters may scatter. After what you saw in Eulmore, Alphinaud isn't so sure that Vauthry won't have a problem if you start taking down the Lightwardens, since if you get rid of the creatures, he won't have a hold on his people anymore. The Exarch agrees, which means Vauthry will have to be distracted while you handle the Wardens. The Exarch puts a lot of faith in the fact that dealing with the Wardens will stop the 8th calamity from happening. It doesn't seem like it could possibly be that simple, but that's only because there's so much that you don't understand. So the Exarch uses the power of the Crystal Tower to explain things to you, just a little better than words could. Long ago, the world was shattered into 14 different worlds, the source where you're from, and 13 tinier shards. They may be separate, but they are still linked to the source and each other. Each shard has a dominant element, and if there is some type of outside stimuli, it could shift the ether of the shard out of balance, and the excess ether will return to the source, causing changes to the land. If the ether that leaves the shard is water-based, then there will be floods on the source. Fire ether will cause droughts and wildfires. Ice would cause blizzards and so on and so forth. If the extra ether keeps flowing to the source, the barrier between the source and that shard will shatter, causing a major disaster or calamity on the source as the shard is merged with the source in its entirety. Each of the umbral calamities has been an event like this. The one you constantly hear about is the 7th with Bahamut and the moon Dalamud, but the others were just as devastating, if not more so, to the source. One day I'm going to do a breakdown of each of them, because you constantly see them referenced in other stories, but for now just know that each calamity was a shard of the original unsundered world rejoining with the source. And in its current state, the first is getting ready to rejoin with the source as well. But if you rebalance the ether of the first, then you'll prevent the next calamity. and the Sin Eaters are the reason the Light Ether is out of control. The Lightwardens don't just draw in other Sin Eaters, but they radiate Light Ether, flooding their domains with light. Even in the areas that were saved from the flood, the Sin Eater's light prevents the night sky from ever coming back. So in short, they need to die. But even though they all knew what needed to be done, they couldn't do it without the Warrior of Light. There's a valid reason for this, but before it can be explained to you, Lena, the guard you met on your first visit to the Crystarium, comes running in to let the Exarch know that the village of Holminster Switch is asking for reinforcements. A large number of Sin Eaters are attacking them, and they don't know how long they can hold them off. Without hesitation, Alphinaud and Alisaie rush off to help, and the Exarch wants you to join him because he believes that your strength will be needed, since a Lightwarden is undoubtedly a part of the group attacking the village. The Sin Eaters brought a giant force to attack Holminster Switch, including a few that you and Alisaie are very familiar with. The giant winged one who murdered Tesleen, and the transformed Tesleen herself. You put them both out of their misery, clearing the way for you to do battle with the strongest Sin Eater you faced, the Lightwarden. It doesn't take long for you to understand why it's a leader among its kind, but you're a leader among warriors, so you bring down the beast. With his death, ether pours out of it, and Lena urges you all to run away. When a Lightwarden dies, its ether consumes someone nearby, turning them into a warden and allowing the cycle to continue. However, the blessing of light that flows through the Warrior of Light gives her the ability to absorb that light without being destroyed, and she uses it to do something that Lena hadn't thought possible. She brings the night sky back to Lakeland. All throughout the Crystarium, people stand and gawk at your handiwork, and Morin proclaims that the Warrior of Darkness has returned. Lena rightfully wants to know who you people are. Mainly you, since you were able to absorb ether that should have killed you, but instead you were able to contain it, making her think that legends of the Warrior of Darkness are actually true. The Exarch kneels down before you and says that he'll be willing to die to help you wipe out the Sin Eaters, if you agree to do it now that you've seen what you'll face. He should have asked you that before he kidnapped you, but better late than never. Alisaie wants to know why he's so willing to die for this, because he could have easily killed himself bringing you all across the worlds like he did, and he claims that it was for the sake of the people of the Crystarium. However, the city didn't exist when he first had summoned the Crystal Tower, so there's clearly more to the story. The answer he gives is vague, which is usually what people do when they're hiding things, but that doesn't change the fact that the Scions are willing to help. Since you fully understand what you've gotten into, the Exarch names you his Warriors of Darkness, since you're fighting to remove the light, and you all get ready to head back to the Crystarium after helping the surviving villagers. They're all talking about the Warrior of Darkness, but the Exarch wants you to keep what you did a secret. Everything is changing for the people of Lakeland, so if you show yourself to be the warrior of their legends, it might cause a bit of chaos. Not to mention whatever Vauthry might do if he finds out that you can destroy the Sin Eaters. The Exarch asks Lena to keep your identity a secret as well, which she agrees to do, although she wants him to tell her the truth eventually. You all get ready to head back, but Alisaie wants to go back into the village alone, probably to mourn her friend without looking weak, so you and Alphinaud leave her to it and head back to the Crystarium. The city is calm when you get there, so whatever the Exarch told the people happened at Holminster kept them from panicking. Alphinaud decides to walk around the city while you let Bragi know that refugees from Holminster will be coming soon. When Bragi realizes that you were at the battle, he tells you to go see Glenard, who might have some work for someone as strong as you are. With the news of the Warrior of Darkness appearing to take down a Lightwarden, a few of the bounty hunters who visit Glenard's bar decided to take down some very powerful Sin Eaters called the Cardinal Virtues. The Virtues appeared a few years ago, and they look exactly like the Warriors of Light who caused the flood. And they're all almost as strong as Lightwardens, which means the hunters could use your help when you have time. I've started covering the stories of the Virtue Hunters on this channel, and I'll get back to them soon because they were all pretty interesting. But for now, the Warrior of Light heads back to her room to rest. Of course she doesn't get any because Ardbert's spirit appears to talk to her, mainly because if he appeared anywhere else, you'd look like you were crazy talking to yourself since no one else can see him. He thinks it's funny that he came to your world and claimed to be the Warrior of Darkness, and now you're doing the same on his. The two of you talk for a while, but somewhere off in the distance a strange girl senses your presence and decides to come to you. Meanwhile, back on the source, the coolest character in the game, Estenian, is invading an Imperial facility. After bashing a Garlean woman with his spear and getting ready to finish her off, he's stopped by Gaius, who lets him know that they aren't his enemies. Both men recognize each other, and Estenian reveals that he's been roped into helping the Scions by Tataru and Cryle, despite the fact that he put a lot of effort into trying to hide from the two women. They have him hunting down Black Rose, something that Gaius and his people have already dealt with at that facility. But there are a lot of places left that house the stuff, and since both men are hunting the same thing, Gaius offers to join forces with the Dragoon as he makes his way to Garlemald itself. When you wake the next morning, you're warned not to leave the Crystarium, because Eulmore has sent soldiers to Lakeland, and the Exarch is trying to come up with a plan to deal with them, so you head to meet up with him and the twins to see if you can help out. Eulmore has someone coming to see him to ask some questions about the death of the Lightwarden, and right after you get there, Lena announces that the visitor has arrived. The Exarch casts a spell to hide the three of you before he allows the emissary to enter. It turns out that they sent the commander of the army, General Ran'jit, to question the Exarch himself. The man wants to know if the Exarch's people killed the Warden, but before he answers him, the Exarch wants to know why Eulmore cares. Apparently Vauthry thinks an attack on the Warden may make relationships between the Sin Eaters and the people uncomfortable, and if the Crystarium is responsible, Vauthry intends to go to war with them. The Exarch doesn't admit to anything, but he does say that he's happy it happened, and if Eulmore has a problem with it, then they can attack whenever they want. But even if they do, all of the Lightwardens are still going to die. Ran'jit thinks it's a waste of time to fight the Eaters, and everyone should just submit to Vauthry so they can live out their lives in peace, but he won't argue the point. He'll tell Vauthry what the Exarch said, and whatever happens after that, happens. He goes to leave, but he stops and asks about the artist and assistant who insulted Vauthry. While the Exarch denies seeing you, Ran'jit makes it known in no uncertain terms that he knows that you're there. Once he's gone, the Exarch lets you know that Ran'jit is not someone to be taken lightly. He was leading soldiers against Sin Eaters until Vauthry showed up, and he can fight extremely well. With Eulmore sending him, the threats he was making were meant to be taken seriously. But Eulmore has been trying to conquer the rest of the world for a while. It was only a matter of time before they decided to invade anyway. The Exarch was honestly surprised that he hadn't declared war right then and there, but Lena had heard that the Eulmoran forces at Laxenloft and Lakeland were busy taking a prisoner, a young woman who they think is the Oracle of Light, Minfilia. Which could be why Ran'jit hadn't attacked. He wants to get the Oracle back to Eulmore first. Lena claims Ran'jit had mentored generations of Minfilias, so it makes sense that capturing her would be his primary goal. The whole thing goes way over your head, and the Exarch apologizes for forgetting to tell you about Minfilia, but he doesn't have time to explain it to you now, so he sends you to Morn along with the twins, so they can all help you understand, even though Alisaie doesn't fully understand it herself. While you do that, the Exarch will get ready for war. Morn is more than happy to share what he knows. The man seems happy to have any company at all, so he dives right into the explanation. 100 years ago, when the flood was about to wipe out the land, Minfilia, your Minfilia, who kept telling you to return to the Waking Sands, showed up and stopped the flood. After that, people started calling her the Oracle of Light. She vanished when the job was done, but 15 years later, her name started popping up again. When the Sin Eaters wiped out the kingdom of Ardbert, a girl showed up who was immune to the Sin Eaters. They claimed she was the Oracle of Light reborn, since she looked exactly like Minfilia, so that's what they called her. She joined the Eulmoran army and took down a lot of Sin Eaters before she died. Her last words being, "Pray return to the Waking Sands." Nah, I'm just joking. She said that Minfilia will return, and a few years later, another girl appeared who looked exactly the same and had the same powers. She joined the army, fought the Eaters, and died only to be reborn so the cycle can continue, just as it has up to this day. Had it not been for her and that cycle of rebirth, the people may have never found out about the Lightwardens and how they could be used to rid the world of the light. However, while the oracles all look the same, they don't have memories of their past lives, so with each resurrection they have to start over. Some of them didn't want to fight the Sin Eaters at all, but they were forced to do their duty by the Eulmorans. The current Minfilia was found 10 years ago, and she's been a prisoner in Eulmore ever since because Vauthry doesn't want people fighting the Sin Eaters. The only reason they kept her alive was to prevent her from being reborn somewhere else. 3 years ago that changed when someone broke into the city and rescued her. And that's all Morin knows, but the person who rescued Minfilia was Thancred. And the two of them have been traveling together, never staying anywhere for long so the Eulmorans wouldn't be able to find them. Alisaie doesn't think it's possible that the girls are the same as your Minfilia since they don't have her memories, but from what we know about reborn Ascians, that's not necessarily the case. Ascians are reborn without their memories, and they need them to be restored before they fully return to how they were before. This could be similar, but regardless, Thancred is protecting the new Minfilia like he did the old one, which means if she's nearby, then he won't be far behind, which means you need to help rescue this Minfilia. And since she's got the same blessing from Hydaelyn that you have, She would be a useful ally. While you're making your plans, the Exarch shows up to let you know that his scouts confirm that it is in fact Minfilia out in Lakeland, and the Eulmorans have her. They haven't left yet, but if they get her to Eulmore, then you won't be able to save her. So you have to be fast, and the Exarch wants the people of the city to help because he still wants to keep you and your power hidden for as long as possible. Lena's already gathered the important people in the city so they can help do their part, and after the Exarch explains the situation, even though a fight with Eulmore could very well be suicide, everyone is on board. They'll fight Eulmore to their last breath if that's what it takes to restore the night sky to the first. So together you all get prepared to go to war with Eulmore and to rescue Minfilia. Even though the Exarch wants the people of the Crystarium to lead the mission to rescue Minfilia, that doesn't mean you can't help out. It just means that you have to join the guard and follow Lena's orders. And the first thing you'll need are some uniforms, which Catelys is happy to take your measurements for. When she's done taking the measurements of you and the twins, she gets to work on resizing some of the uniforms while Lena lets you know what the mission is. Soldiers will fly some amaro above the battlefield and drop this substance called dream powder so it can knock out enough Eulmoran soldiers to even the odds. Once that's done, a special group of soldiers will break into the fortress to rescue the Oracle. That unit will be made up of you, Alisaie, Alphinaud, and Lena. Your group will split up and hit the area from two sides. The twins will take one side, and you and Lena the other. But first you all have to see Chesamil to get a potion that'll make you immune to the dream powder. The stuff is so bitter that she wants you to drink it in front of her, so that way if it makes you sick, you're already in the hospital. With that done, you head out to Lakeland to get ready for the attack. There are a lot of Eulmorans escorting Minfilia to their ship, and when they see the handful of Crystarium soldiers flying overhead, they hardly think of them as a threat, until the dream powder starts putting them to sleep. Then it's time for you and the others to make your move. The powder brought down a lot of the soldiers, but there are still plenty to stand in your way. You, Lena, and the twins fight your way through until you find Minfilia. Once you've freed her, you go to leave, but Ran'jit is there blocking your path, so you finally get to see what the Exarch meant when he said that the man was dangerous. And it doesn't take long for him to bring down the twins and Minfilia, who unlike the one you remember, can actually fight. You're forced to fight him one-on-one, and while you can hold your own for a while, his experience along with his strange techniques gives him the upper hand on you too. He plans on taking you all back to Eulmore, especially Alphinaud, who he knows is the artist that Vauthry wants so badly, but Thancred shows up and jumps into the fight, sporting his new look as a gunbreaker. He's severely outmatched by Ran'jit, who, now that he knows that Thancred was the one who freed Minfilia from Eulmore in the first place, he fully plans on killing. But using a device that the Exarch gave him for just this occasion, Thancred teleports you all a good distance away. Ran'jit goes to jump after you all, but the Exarch traps him in place for long enough for you all to enter a place that not even the Eulmorans go, the fairy kingdom of Il Mheg. While you make your escape, a strange man looks down at the scene, wondering just how the Exarch managed to summon you to the first. He's not happy that you're there, but your presence makes him think that maybe, just maybe, he can accomplish his plans, whatever they are, without any bloodshed. You all make it to the fairy kingdom, which was once the land of Ardbert, until the Sin Eaters wiped it out. Thancred finally gets to tell you how good it is to see you all again after 5 years, and he gets to fuss at Minfilia for running off and getting captured. He had been planning a rescue of his own when the Exarch told him of his own plan and gave him the order to get you all to Il Mheg if things went bad. Urianger has been living there for a while, and Thancred and Minfilia have visited him a few times. The Exarch wants the two of them to take you to Urianger, then, together you all deal with the Lightwarden that's in the area. It's a good plan, but first Alisaie wants to know what made Minfilia run off in the first place. Apparently it was because she sensed you. She knew that she had to meet you, but with the Eulmorans being in Lakeland, she doubted Thancred would have let her go. Something he points out would have saved her from getting captured and having Ran'jit on their tail. That's why children shouldn't be in charge of making major decisions. They never look at the big picture and end up causing more problems than they solve. While he's yelling at her, you all start to hear voices from things in the area that you can't see. That brief moment of distraction gave the Pixies a chance to catch you all in a spell and make Thancred and Minfilia both forget how to get to Urianger's house. The Pixies are one of the Fae folk that live in Il Mheg, and they spend a lot of time casting illusions and playing pranks on people. And once they have you, the only way to get free is if they let you. They seem to want to play with you all, so they should let you find their village. So you all head to Lita Laran. The place seems empty, but Thancred knows a strangely shaped plant that lets you see the Pixies if you look through it, so he sends you to find a piece with a warning. Don't respond to the Pixies at all if you hear them talk to you. Otherwise, they'll do a lot of unpleasant things to you. With the Looking Glass, Thancred uses a trick Urianger showed him to spot the Pixies. Since they've been seen, they all reveal themselves. There's a lot of the troublesome things, and they all want you to play with them, but you don't have the time. You need them to lift their spell so you can go to Urianger and keep things moving. They agree to do it, if you help them with a few chores, like watering their leaf men, which are actually real men they turned into shrubs, and other stuff like that. But even after you finish a few of their tasks, they still refuse to let you leave. They don't actually plan on ever letting any of you go. It's extremely childish, but since the Pixies are born from the souls of dead children, it makes sense. So the only way you'll ever be allowed to leave before you get old and die is if you find a Pixie that's willing to work with you. That finally makes you remember the Pixie Feo Ul, who you made a pact with when you first got to the Crystarium. You give Feo a call, and he's not in the least bit happy that you waited so long to call. After you do a bit of begging, Feo shows up and yells at you for waiting so long to give him a call. Hearing you get yelled at reminds Alphinaud of his childhood, which he's dumb enough to say out loud next to Alisaie, who starts to choke him. Since you begged, Feo orders the other Pixies to leave you all alone because you and your friends are there for his amusement, and if they don't let you go, Feo plans on dumping all of your items all over their village. That horrifies you as much as it does the Pixies, and they decide to let you all go as long as they can keep the twins, at least until you come back from Urianger's. Now that you've made a deal, they remove their spell and you get to witness the true beauty of Il Mheg, and the memories of the way to Urianger's house come back. The house is big, which means Urianger probably spent a lot of time clicking on the plot hoping to get it before anyone else, and like Thancred, he's changed jobs during his time on the first. He expected you to show up, but he expected it a little bit later. He has a lot he wants to talk to you about, but first Thancred sends Minfilia outside to imbue some bullets with ether for him while you explain what you've been doing since you arrived on the first. After you get him caught up, he gives you the details of what he saw when he crossed over. The Eorzeans and the Domans were fighting the Garleans so well that they forced them to retreat. With no other choice, the Empire used its bioweapon, Black Rose. It was even more potent than they thought, and not only did it kill their enemies, but it wreaked havoc all across the Empire too. So many died that nations were no longer able to sustain themselves. The world fell into chaos, but even worse, Black Rose caused the land itself to die. Famine spread and the survivors became more savage, fighting for their very lives. And all of the heroes who could have helped bring order to the chaos died, including the Warrior of Light. The 8th calamity would be the worst in history, which is why it has to be stopped at all cost. Urianger has been studying, trying to figure out just why Black Rose was so much more powerful than it should have been, and he's figured it out. Astral Ether, or the Ether of Darkness, is the ether associated with growth and life, while Umbral Ether, the Ether of Light, is focused on peace, balance, and stability. Life is chaotic, which is why things grow and change. With Umbral Ether flowing from the first to the source, it's slowing the movement of the ether of the land. Black Rose does the same thing to living people, so the merger of the massive amount of light ether to the source at the same time Black Rose is unleashed would cause unmatched devastation. Which means you need to save the first, so the Lightwarden of Il Mheg has to go. Urianger has found that too. It's in the castle in the middle of the lake. Unfortunately, to get in there, you'll need the help of the Pixies. Good news is, Urianger knows how to deal with them, so he'll be joining you. To get their help, you'll need a gift which he helps you put together, but he has one last surprise for you. He's crafted another piece of white auracite, just in case the Ascians try to stop you. Since they're definitely behind the Rejoining, that's probably going to happen. Minfilia finally completes her task for Thancred, which is good since he still can't manipulate ether. Gunbreakers use ether-filled ammo to perform their more flashy techniques, so it's kinda mandatory that he has the bullets made. Minfilia has a talent for making them, so it's all good. Since you won't be coming back to Urianger's house for a while, he tells Minfilia that she can pick a book to bring with her, something she happily runs off to do. They keep sending the girl out of the room while they talk about the important things, something I hated when I was a kid. And this time, Thancred tells you of his last conversation with your Minfilia. After he saved the young Minfilia from Eulmore, they went to Amarang where the flood was stopped, and the original Minfilia took over the young girl's body. Thancred begged her to tell him how to bring her back, but now she's basically an Ascian using the young girl as a vessel, and she's been using each Minfilia to spread the message of Hydaelyn across the First, and she's caused each one of them to die, never having a life of their own, and she can't do it anymore. The only way that she'll do it again is if her newest vessel decides to let her take over, but if the girl wants her own life, Minfilia will give her all of her power, including what she's been using to come back to life. She'll be gone for good, but the girl will eventually be as powerful as Minfilia had become. Thancred doesn't want her to go, of course, but the choice is up to the child, and as a last request, Minfilia asks Thancred to watch over the girl just like he did for her, and of course he'll do it, which is why he's been teaching the girl everything he can. The young Minfilia doesn't remember the event, and while Thancred has told her a lot, he hasn't told her about that day. And right now, there's other things to take care of, so you head back to the Pixie village where the twins have been put through who knows what while you were gone. The Pixies aren't happy that you're about to take the twins from them, but they do love their gifts. And as part of Fae custom, since you gave them a gift, they have to give you one thing that you want. And what you want is to get into the castle. The Pixies think you're going to die, but of course they'll help just so they can watch the Lightwarden kill you, especially since that warden is their king, Titania. Titania had fought the first Lightwarden that had attacked the Pixies, and won. But the light that came out of it turned Titania into the new warden, so the other Pixies sealed the castle with Titania inside. They divided the seal for the magic into 4 relics and split them among the different Fae people. They give you their relic, but you'll need the shell crown from the Fuath, the stone scepter from the Nu Mou, and the crystal shoes from the Amuro. So it's off to the lake to try to get the crown. Apparently if you call the Fuath at the untouchable gate, they'll show up to talk. But they take so long to answer that Alisaie thinks it may be a good idea to search the lake for them since they are water spirits. That's not really a problem since both you and Alisaie have the Kojin underwater breathing blessing, and Thancred, who can hold his breath for 10 minutes, already taught Minfilia how to swim. Alphinaud has been practicing, which means he sucks slightly less than he did before, but surprisingly Urianger can't swim and would prefer to just walk across the water because learning how to do that was a better way to spend his time than just learning how to swim. But leave it to Urianger to complicate the simplest of things. Fortunately, the Fuath answer before you have to try. When Urianger asks for the crown, they have no problem letting you come get it, but since they haven't had mortal visitors in a while, they want you to come to Dohn Mheg, the Forbidden Realm. If you can make it through and entertain them, then you can have the crown. So it's into Dohn Mheg you go, to play the games of yet another of the Fae people. When you and the Scions head into Dohn Mheg, the Fuath who claim they were willing to give you the shell crown put you through a whole lot of trouble as you make your way through their lands. But after you make it to the heart of their city and beat up their shape-changing leader, they finally do what they said and give you the crown. However, they changed the deal at the last minute and decide that since you were so entertaining, they want to keep you forever. So instead of letting you walk out with the crown, they bombard you with water and try to drown you. Fortunately for you, you received a blessing from the Kojin that allows you to breathe underwater, so instead of drowning, you wake up to see Ardbert floating in front of you. He lets you know that what you need to know about making deals with the Fuath is that you don't make deals with the Fuath. They were born from the souls of the drowned, and their plan was to turn you into one of them. Had you drowned, you would have woke up as a creepy frog man, which would have ruined my glamours. Fortunately, all of the Scions are alive and searching for you, so you head up to show them that you're alive and well, and to tell them what nearly happened to you. While the whole thing was unpleasant, they did at least give the crown to Alisaie. So you have 2 of the pieces you need to open the king's castle. But before you can head on to hunt down the next item, a pixie comes flying up to ask about a big mob of mortals who are making their way into Il Mheg. He wanted to know if they were your friends, or if they were people the pixies could play with. Alphinaud tells him to do as much damage as they can, but just to make sure he's not sentencing a group of harmless travelers to a horrible fate, he and Alisaie go to make sure the intruders are in fact a part of the Eulmorean army, and since the pixies refuse to take one of them, both twins have to go. While they do that, Urianger, you, Thancred, and Minfilia head off to meet the next members of the Fae folk, the Nu Mou. Unlike the Pixies and the Fuath, the Nu Mou have lived in the area since before the flood, and they are very friendly toward people. They are where Urianger learned a lot about the Fae folk and the First in general. When you arrive at the Nu Mou village, your reception is a lot different than you'd expect. Seeing so many of you at once is apparently a very joyous occasion, but despite that, when Urianger asks for the stone scepter, the third relic that you need, the elder is reluctant to hand it over. Too many of them died to seal away the king, and letting Titania out would either get them all killed or force them to leave their lands, two things that they don't really want to do. However, after Urianger lets them know that you've already taken down a Lightwarden, and after he uses a few of the words of power on them, those words being fetch and roll over, they decide to consider your request. Wish my dog would listen when I told him to do those things. When I tell him to roll over, he just drools. Maybe I should trade him in for a Nu Mou. Anyway, while the elders decide on whether or not to give you the scepter, you and the other Scions get the Nu Mou the opportunity to serve you by doing favors for them that lets them get their shops back open. I don't see how that's really serving you, but to each his own. While you perform some simple tasks, you notice Minfilia following you around. She obviously wants to talk about something and offers to help you with some of your work as an icebreaker. She lets you know that unlike the other Minfilias, she had been locked away and kept from learning how to fight, at least until Thancred took her and trained her. He let her know that if summoning you failed, then she would have to deal with the Lightwardens. She knows that's the only reason Thancred really keeps her around, because since she isn't the real Minfilia, he actually hates her. She knows something happened when they went to the place Minfilia Prime had stopped the flood, and she thinks the original had taken her body and said something to Thancred. Since then, he's been angry, and she thinks her being around him makes it worse. She wanted to find a way to help, which is why she came to find you. She knew that was what the real Minfilia had wanted, but now that you're there, she doesn't know what else she's supposed to do. I'm guessing it's the same thing Minfilia Prime used to do. A whole lot of nothing, followed by getting captured, rescued, then more nothing. While she's talking, shockwaves come from the castle and you both hear Titania complaining about how boring being imprisoned is and how he wants someone to come inside and play. Minfilia rushes off to tell Thancred what happened while you head back to the Nu Mou, only to find out that they heard Titania as well. Apparently Titania was so powerful that turning into a Sin Eater didn't remove all of his personality, and as a Pixie, he loved to be free and play. That desire leaks out of the seal from time to time, and the Fae folk tend to try to ignore it, but it's becoming harder and harder to do that. That, among other things, makes the Nu Mou decide to give you the scepter. Only one item remains, so it's off to the Amuro you go. But before you can head off, the Nu Mou Elder lets you know that Titania is the title given to the one chosen to lead the Fae folk, and as part of the promotion, the other Fae give elemental blessings to boost the king's power. And that power was merged with the power of the Lightwarden, making the king even stronger. So if you're scared, the elder offers you a chance to stay with them, something that makes Feo Ul appear since, once again, some Fae are trying to steal his sapling. After that, you head off to meet the Amuro and their large leader Seto, who after you ask him for the relic, turns you down. After talking to a few of the other Amuro, and petting them because they like that, you learn that Seto is refusing to give you the relic because the Amuro don't want to watch any other mortal get killed by the Sin Eaters. They always served mortals, and after a Ronkan mage gave them intelligence, they became even more loyal servants. However, after Ronka fell, most of the Amuro with the gift died out. Every now and again, one of them is born with this heightened intelligence, and if they live among people for long enough, they'll learn how to talk and such. Because of this relationship with mortals, Seto doesn't want to watch you die. However, your confidence reminds him of an old friend, so he decides to test you. First, he lures out a bunch of Sin Eaters that you easily deal with. Then he asks you to go get his medallion that he dropped in a lake during a fight with more of the monsters. Amuro aren't exactly aquatic creatures, and he'd asked the Fuath, but having dealt with them, you can understand why he doesn't want to. So you go and get it for him. Turns out the medallion was a gift from Ardbert from during the times when Seto had traveled around with the Warrior of Darkness. When Ardbert died, people blamed him and his friends for starting the flood. Seto tried to defend him, bringing up all the good things Ardbert and the others had done for the people, but they wouldn't listen. After a while, Seto couldn't take it anymore and he left. Ironically enough, your soul looks very similar to Ardbert's. Seto knows that you aren't him, but he can see souls, and your souls are nearly identical. Because of that, he decides to give you the final relic. Unfortunately, there's no time to celebrate. a pixie flies in to let you know that the twins and the other pixies were tormenting the Eulmorans and having a good time doing it, until an old man came through and evaded all of their traps. We already know that the old man is Ran'jit, and now there's no choice but for the rest of the Scions to go help hold him off while you deal with the Lightwarden. Minfilia wants to help since she's safe from the effects of the ether just like you are, or at least she should be, but Thancred doesn't think she's ready for that and she'll only get in your way. So they leave to hold off Ran'jit, while you go to face off against the leader of the Pixies, Titania, alone. When the Warrior of Light enters Titania's castle, the king is extremely excited to play with you. The Pixie Lightwarden plays extremely rough, using all types of powerful magic from fire spells to making giant trees grow, come to life and try to beat you to death. It's extremely easy to see how that particular Pixie was able to beat the previous Lightwarden, and you have your work cut out for you. But after struggling through all of that, you manage to bring the Warden down and absorb the light, causing the night sky to return to Il Mheg. While that's a cause to celebrate, there's something else that you need to worry about. Feo Ul appears, and the treasures that you used to open the castle float out into the air. Feo reveals their true purpose was a bit more than simply letting you into the castle. The artifacts were meant to open the door so Titania could be brought down by the person who would become the new king. Fortunately for you, Feo Ul steps in to take the blessings, saving you from being turned into a pixie, and instead transforming Feo into the new Titania. Now that your friend has gained the power and the size of the Pixie King, you head out to deal with the Eulmorans. Ran'jit is so overpowered that he can see through the Pixie's illusions and can hold off the Scions' attacks on his own. Even the sight of the darkening sky doesn't make him give up on capturing Minfilia. However, with the crowning of the new king, all of the Fae folk join together and do a lot of horrible things to the invaders. They turn people into leaf men, which is really creepy. Puddles of water appear and people get dragged off and drowned by the Fuath. I mean, it's bad. Not for you, since all of their violence is directed somewhere else for once, but it is bad for the Eulmorans, so Ran'jit is forced to retreat, although he lets you know that the Fae folk won't escape Vauthry's wrath either. With your mission in Il Mheg done, and new allies gained if they choose to help you again, it's time to get back to the Crystarium. While Ran'jit did follow you, that doesn't mean he didn't send soldiers to the Crystarium to punish them for their part in freeing Minfilia. Despite becoming the new Titania, Feo Ul still sends a piece of himself with you to fulfill the pact the two of you made, so it's back home you all go to see just how much damage was done in your absence. It seems like the city managed to avoid being attacked at all. Ran'jit was apparently more interested in going after you than attacking the city, which is a good thing. However, the mystery man who had been watching you finally decides to reveal himself. He is Solus Fangalvis, the man who started the Garlean Empire, but he is also an Ascian of equal rank to La Habrea, the man known as Emet-Selch. He's not at all happy about you going around and fixing the world when it was almost ready to be merged with the Source. He admits that he had thought about just killing you all, but that sounds too much like what La Habrea had done, and that ended badly, so he decided to try something different. He decided to work with you, helping you take down the Lightwardens, a proposal that Alphinaud thinks is totally insane. The Ascians have been trying to rejoin the worlds for millennia, and they still haven't changed their plans. The thing is, the Scions never stop to ask, why? Emet-Selch believes that maybe if they knew the truth, then there may be a solution that doesn't end in death. Not like it bothers him. He's immortal, so if working with you fails, he literally has forever to come up with a new plan. The Scions don't trust him, especially since he showed himself as an illusion instead of in person, but considering how many gods and Ascians you've killed, he does have a good reason to protect himself. He leaves, giving you time to think about what he said, promising that he will see you all again soon. While it is something to think about, the Scions all go to report to the Exarch while you get some rest, since you did fight the Warden alone and you could definitely use some sleep, even though you'll probably have nightmares about the Titania fight for a while. Food's already been brought to your room, and of course your friendly neighborhood ghost Ardbert shows up to talk. He thinks the Exarch probably watches you in your room with his creepy mirror, so he's likely seen you talking to yourself. I think that's probably the least important thing he's seen if he's watching you in your room at all hours of the night, but we'll just leave that alone. However, Ardbert doesn't think he's a bad guy, but he does want to know where he was during his own time. When he was alive, there was no Crystal Exarch, or Crystarium. None of that was there during his time, so he barely knows more about any of it than you do. But none of that matters more than Emet-Selch. Ardbert and his friends had worked with the Slitherbough when the flood had started consuming their world, because he had been convinced that the Rejoining was the only way for them to save their world. It wasn't until later that they found out the flood was caused by the Ascians in the first place. He doesn't think you should trust him, but you should learn about your enemy before you end up like him. He is a constant reminder of how you can have great intentions but end up in a really bad spot, and it's kind of depressing to both of you. So the Warrior of Light tries to cheer him up by making him talk about his friend Seto. Surprisingly, Ardbert does something that no one else seems to have managed to do. He makes you talk about yourself for a bit, until you fall asleep. The next day you head to the Ocular to meet up with the Scions and the Exarch to figure out what you're going to do next. However, your new friend Emet-Selch is already in there waiting for you. He doesn't understand why you're surprised, since he did tell you that he'd be seeing you again soon. I kind of thought he was saying that in the same way people who are running late claim that they're up the street from your house when they really only just left theirs. But Emmett meant that literally. I like him already. He once again tells you that he won't interfere in your mission. He just wants to watch. He's very curious about the Exarch too. Summoning you across worlds was no simple feat, and it makes the man a very interesting person indeed. Of course, the others, especially Thancred, has no intention of ever trusting Emmett. After getting possessed by La Habrea the way that he did, I can understand his feelings. But Emmett, being an extremely powerful immortal, has no reason to lie to you. If you can prove yourselves worthy and powerful enough, he has no problem treating you as allies worthy of knowing the truth about the world, his kind, and his mission. Sadly, no one is willing to even give him a chance, which he accepts for now, but he believes you'll change your tune when you get tired of making the same mistakes because of your ignorance. But until you do, he hopes you'll at least be entertaining to watch. When he leaves, the Scions talk about what he said, and Alphinaud actually believes he was being honest, at least to a certain degree. The effort he put into talking to you all wouldn't have been necessary if he was just trying to trick you, but that doesn't mean working with him is a good idea, so it's better to just stick to your current mission. Back on the topic of the Sin Eaters, the Exarch is happy to say that in only a few short weeks, your group has done more in the war against the creatures than he has in a century. But there are still wardens in Kalusia, Ohrani, and Rak'tika, so your work's nowhere near done. And no one knows where those are, so the Exarch wants to split up your group to cover more ground. Alisaie will go back to Ohrani since she knows the area. Alphinaud will do the same in Kalusia, while the rest of you go to Rak'tika to find Y'shtola. Once you have her, the hunt for the warden there shouldn't last long, because Y'shtola is very good at seeing ether. It'll be good to see her again, since most of the Scions haven't really spoken to her since she went into the forest, which is the Exarch's fault because apparently he's done something to tick her off. May have something to do with the whole soul snatching thing, but with Y'shtola you never know. While you're doing that, he has his own mission. Apparently Vauthry invited him to Eulmore to kill him, to discuss what happened between their people in Lakeland. Because this is so obviously a trap, the Exarch is of course going to go and see what happens. Because the best thing to do when someone wants you dead is to walk into their house surrounded by soldiers and an overpowered senior citizen who, as of this moment, has no known weaknesses. Before you head off to meet Y'shtola, the Exarch sends you to a place where people used to gather to worship the light, so you can get a tablet with information on it that Y'shtola would likely find to be useful. The people who had worshipped the light before the flood came switched to worship in the darkness once the Sin Eaters started murdering everybody. Then they migrated to Rak'tika and called themselves the Knights Blessed. Since Y'shtola is trying to learn all she can about the group, the tablet you grab will make her very happy. With that in hand, you all head off to the Rak'tika Greatwood to bask in the glory of the great song Lahi. I spent so much time in this zone that I started hearing that song in my sleep, and since it means wake up in ancient Ronkan, that is kind of funny. While you trek through the very large and mostly uninhabitable forest, Urianger of course gives you a history lesson, pointing out the places where people were actually able to settle. The lesson is interrupted by Emet-Selch, who walks up and starts reminiscing about the days where he explored new areas and subjugated primitive people for the glory of Garlean. Since he enjoyed planting Garlean's flag so much, Thancred offers to plant one up his backside, which I don't think would have been all that comfortable. Since he's dead set on sticking around, Minfilia asks him to help you all fight, but he refuses, partially because he was only going to observe, but the huge amount of light ether that's pouring into the forest makes it difficult for him to even hang around you, let alone fight. So he will simply remain a not-so-silent companion. When the Ascian finally decides to be quiet, Urianger gets back to his history lesson. While there are spots in the forest where people live, the Lightwardens and Sin Eaters are slowly taking ground from them. 2 years ago, a swarm of Sin Eaters destroyed one of the biggest settlements in the area and killed a lot of the Knights Blessed leaders. They didn't know what to do, so Y'shtola took over and started to lead them. They started to rebuild their home, so if Urianger's memory is right, they should be nearby at Fort Gone. To say they've been rebuilding, the place still looks like it burned down yesterday. However, all of that was apparently a trap to lure you all to the center of the ruins so the Knights Blessed could surround you. They seem to think you're Sin Eaters, despite the fact that you can talk and didn't immediately attack them when you showed up, or a whole lot of other things that anyone with eyes could see makes you completely different from the monsters. Of course, Emet-Selch doesn't help the situation by teleporting away. Y'shtola shows up before her people can fill you all up with arrows, but you realize that the reason they assumed you were all Sin Eaters was because of the enormous amount of light ether that she saw coming out of you. She recognizes the others, but she has no idea who you are until Urianger tells her that you just arrived on the first a while ago and have already killed 2 Lightwardens. Even knowing that, she can hardly believe it's you because the only creatures who radiate the amount of light ether that you're letting off are Sin Eaters, strong ones. Nevertheless, she tells her people to lower their weapons so she can give you a proper welcome to Rak'tika. She wants to hear about what you've done since you made it to the first, but she'll listen to the story at the new Knights Blessed settlement, Slitherbough. Once you get Y'shtola caught up, she lets you know that she used to follow the Crystal Exarch's guidance too, but he kept hiding things from her which made her go her own way. And her research led her to Rak'tika, which she knows very well after all of these years. And while she doesn't know exactly where the warden is, she can help. The forest used to sit at the heart of the Ronkan Empire, and to the east is Ixmaya, where a lot of relics of the ancient civilization still exist. However, the place is guarded by a group of warriors who murder anyone who steps in their lands, which makes it a good place for the warden to hide. However, Y'shtola has a strange feeling that the tablet the Exarch sent to her may hide the key for getting into the area without getting filled with arrows. Once she deciphers it, with Urianger's help of course. The two of them get to work while you take a tour of the city so you can understand how important your role as the Warrior of Darkness is to the people. Runar is more than happy to show you around, and Minfilia joins you as he tells you of the Knights Blessed and how Y'shtola, using the name of Master Matoya because of some superstitions about saying your real name with the light pouring down on you, helped drive back the Sin Eaters before helping rebuild. Naturally, she took over, even though the people were reluctant to let an outsider lead, but eventually they warmed up to the idea. To help you learn more about Y'shtola's new people, Runar puts you through a few of their rituals, like learning their special greeting, dousing you with some blessed water that tingles although it shouldn't have, and getting you to do chores because the Warrior of Light is easily tricked into working for free. While you're doing all of that nonsense, one of the Blessed comes running in to tell Runar that some Sin Eaters, ones that can cause others to transform into the beast, are in the woods nearby. They're not headed toward the city, but if everyone comes home to hide until they leave, they won't be able to recover Tajia's Hearthstone before the ritual. Tajia was one of the people who died during a Sin Eater attack. They got her body back, but they lost her necklace, her Hearthstone. It's the most valuable possession of any of the Knights Blessed, since they get the stones at birth, and it has to be given as an offering at the funeral so she can move on to whatever comes after death. It's too risky for any of the Blessed to go get, but since Minfilia is immune to the Sin Eater's corruption, she offers to go out there to get the stone. And of course, you're not going to let her go alone. In the forest, it doesn't take long to spot 2 of the familiar winged Sin Eaters. Since there's 2 of them and 2 of you, Minfilia takes one while you deal with the other one. While she does get a few scrapes in the battle, she does bring it down by herself, proving that she is 1000% more useful than the old Minfilia. With a little searching around, you find the Hearthstone and bring it back to Runar. With it, they can give Tajia a proper send-off, and Runar wants you there as honored guests since you helped them out. Of course, Thancred has to fuss at Minfilia first for putting herself in danger like that, but since she was with you, he's not too upset. The Blessed all gather in a cave, safe from the light, where they can use Tajia's real name in the ceremony. As a part of their ritual, they pray to the Warrior of Darkness so he or she can bring Tajia's soul to paradise. The Warrior of Light feels odd being worshipped like some kind of god, especially since she knows she's not worthy of it. But Minfilia thinks that even though you can't take Tajia's soul to paradise, you can give paradise to the Blessed by restoring the night sky. Fortunately, Y'shtola and Urianger have deciphered the tablet, and it turned out to be very useful indeed. It was even older than they had thought, and it contained information on the ancient Ran'jit Empire from a time where the nation was at war with its neighbors, and they were losing. They sent messages out to their allies, and the tablet was one of those. Normally that wouldn't be all that useful, but the Ran'jits had to give a way for their neighbors to prove that they were actually friends. If they can translate the instructions, then they may be able to get access to the ruins without, getting dead. There's just one problem. To translate the final part will require the use of a giant stone monument that is basically the Rosetta Stone. However, the monument is in the land of a fanatical group of darkness worshippers called the Children of the Everlasting Dark, and it's unlikely that they'll let you in their lands without a fight. Now that a decision has been made on what to do, the Warrior of Light, Thancred, and Y'shtola head out to sneak into the land of the Children of the Everlasting Dark. Of course, just rushing in will get you quite dead, so a little bit of planning has to be done. Y'shtola has a guard stationed in a spot where he can spy on the group, so she wants to find him to see what he knows. But you have to be careful because the children enjoy killing others, and Y'shtola would like to avoid fighting them if she can. You find the guard while he's in the middle of getting attacked. Your special power is not the echo, but your timing, because you always show up right when people need you. You save his life, and he gets a chance to tell you what he's seen. Apparently, the children have been breeding a large number of venomous spiders that they obviously plan on using on the Knights Blessed. Y'shtola, always being one to figure out how to make things work in her favor, figures that since the children are interested in the spiders, attacking the nest will make them have to move to protect them, and make it easier for you to sneak in. Thancred, of course, loves the plan, so you grab some smoke bombs from a nearby outpost and use them to knock out some bees so you can stuff their hives in a sack that Thancred throws into the area where the spiders' nests are. The bees are not even a little bit happy about what you've done to them, so they start stinging everything around them once they get out of the sack, including the spiders, which causes enough chaos for you all to sneak in to find the stone Y'shtola was talking about. Of course, you'll still have to guard her just in case some of the cult members show up while she's working. The monument is in a room with a lot of strange murals on the wall that seem to show scenes of important events, and since you likely won't ever come back, Y'shtola wants you to study those while she works on the monument. The pictures actually cause Ardbert to show himself again, and he knows what they are. They show images of heroes throughout the history of the First, from the Age of the Gods to the Empire of Ran'jit, and even him and his friends fighting the Shadowkeeper. There had been a researcher in the cave who had given them a lot of odd jobs, and he had believed that the first painting dated back to a time long forgotten as a tribute to the heroes of a long forgotten era. The place was found by a Ran'jit explorer who had decided to make a second picture of the heroes from his era. The researcher who Ardbert was working with told him that one day him and his friends would be up there too. They all thought the guy was crazy, but apparently he did put them up there. But it looks more faded than the other pictures, like someone tried to remove it. He asks if you think that someone will draw pictures and keep records of everything you've done one day, but Y'shtola finishes her work before you can answer, so he leaves. I kinda wonder if she can see him since she no longer sees the world like everyone else, but who knows. Y'shtola keeps her own secrets as much as Urianger. With everything you need, the three of you head back to Slitherbough. Y'shtola and Urianger get to work on the final translations, while Runar prepares some food for dinner. When the meal's finished, the patrols still haven't made it back to town like they should have, but instead of waiting for them, Runar sends you to tell your friends that it's time to eat. Outside of Y'shtola's door, you hear her arguing with Urianger about you. While the blessing of light is preventing you from becoming a Lightwarden, the light ether is still corrupting you. She doesn't think the ether of the wardens is being burned off by your powers at all, it's just staying inside of you. Urianger believes the same thing, but he won't draw any conclusions until he knows for sure. Y'shtola doesn't think you have time for him to waste doing more research. In fact, you already might be out of time. And that's not the only thing she's worried about. Since Urianger is always telling people half-truths, she wants to know whether he really saw the 8th Umbral Calamity like he claimed. He's about to answer her when one of the Blessed comes running into the city, screaming for help. Meanwhile, in Eulmore, the Exarch arrives for his meeting with Vauthry. The guy doesn't waste any time asking if the Exarch is working with the Warriors of Darkness. The Exarch has his own question that he wants answered first. He wants to know why Vauthry isn't helping get rid of the Wardens himself. It's because the world is doomed anyway. Even if the Wardens are wiped out, the First is finished. If the Sin Eaters were gone, the people would fight over the land's resources. They'd fight, die, and starve themselves to death. The people need a god to guide them, and Vauthry's that god. He'll determine who gets to live in his world, and the Sin Eaters are there to make sure the world remains under his control. Knowing that there will be no agreement made between them, the Exarch vows to fight Vauthry every step of the way. The man of course hadn't planned on letting the Exarch leave alive. He attacks, but the Exarch wasn't nearly stupid enough to be there in the flesh. Realizing he'd been tricked by an illusion, Vauthry throws another incredible temper tantrum. Back out in Rak'tika, it seems that Ran'jit and his forces have arrived, and he's come to lay claim to Rak'tika under Vauthry's orders. As of this moment, the Knights Blessed are now subjects of Eulmore, and the Children of the Everlasting Dark will act as the leaders of Rak'tika when the Eulmorans are away. This doesn't sit well with Runar and the others, but Ran'jit makes it clear that anyone who refuses to leave Slitherbough and head to the lands of the Children of the Dark will be killed. He leaves to give you all time to pack and take care of the injured guard, but he's not giving you that long. The guard's been given some very potent poison that even the best healers in the city can't cure, probably as an example of what Ran'jit will do to anyone who doesn't obey his orders. Unfortunately, with the Eulmorans allied with the Children, the Knights Blessed can't hope to hold them off. They have to give in to the demands, but that doesn't mean you all have to suffer with them. Your work is too important, so Runar wants you all to run away, something that Y'shtola would never do, especially now that she has you there. She knows that the Eulmorans are there to protect the Lightwarden, so she wants to hunt it down before they get back. If the knight returns before they make it back, then they'll leave. Plus, she's deciphered the end of the tablet, and she knows how to get into Ixmaya. She leaves Runar in charge of the Knights Blessed while she takes you to retrieve the Ronkan seal that you need from some underwater ruins. The ruins are huge, so it's fortunate that you can breathe underwater. While you get the seal, Thancred and Minfilia work on strengthening the defenses of Slitherbough so they can have a chance to hold off the Eulmorans while you hunt down the Lightwarden. After your swim, with the seal in hand, you and the others head to Ixmaya, where you are immediately attacked by the guardians of the area, a trio of bunny girls, one of which is extremely eager to kill Y'shtola. But when she pulls out the Ronkan seal, they allow you to live and follow them to their village, where after they check to make sure the seal isn't fake, you'll hopefully find a lead to where the Lightwarden's hiding. While the Guardians allowed you to come to their city, the threat of death isn't gone. Not until after they verify the seal is real, which, when the leader of the Violent Bunnies looks it over, she discovers that it is in fact legit. So your group is officially welcomed as allies of Ronka, something they've been waiting for 3,000 years. Not these particular Viera, I mean they live a long time, but not that long. But their people have been waiting for that long. The three sisters are Almet, the leader who shot at you, Ulmet, the middle sister who tried to skewer Y'shtola on a spear, and Simet, the red-haired one with the staff. Apparently things are bad for the people of Finau, and your arrival is appreciated, but before they burden you with their problems, they want to give you a tour, which includes letting you know about their purpose there, and what happened to the Ronkan Empire. Almet and her sisters are descendants of the palace guards that served the last emperor, and they are carrying out the last wish of that emperor by protecting the knowledge of the Ronkans to keep it out of the wrong hands. They were supposed to do this until an ally came with the seal, then they could share the knowledge with them so Ronka could live on. They've been doing that ever since. One of the reasons they were picked is because Viera lived for so long. The other reason is because they were some of the Empire's deadliest warriors. Of course, the Flood made their job harder since the Sin Eaters have been wiping out their settlements. There used to be a lot of them, but now Finau is the only one left. Every year they lose more people, and eventually they'll all be dead, and Ronka will die with them. Now that you know their story, you're free to ask them anything you want, which of course there is one question that's on all of your minds. Where's the Lightwarden? Unfortunately, they don't know where it is. They haven't seen any sign of it in the last 30 years, which makes Reen ask just how old they are. A question they don't answer, but they did say they live at least 3 times as long as Ellison, so they could all easily be over 100 and still be considered young. I wonder how that would feel to still be considered a young man after a century of living. It'd probably end up boring, but I'd at least have time to write all my novels. While they don't know where the warden could be, there's bound to be someone in the city who's got some idea where the thing is. Sure enough, one Viera's mother had told her that she used to live in a village near the Rak'tika Falls until it was destroyed by Sin Eaters, but she's seen one Sin Eater during the attack that the others obeyed, which sounds a lot like a Lightwarden to me. Almet and her sisters know of the place, but the tunnels leading to it collapsed years ago after a battle, so no one's been able to go there. They tried to clear the path, but the Sin Eaters forced them back, so they just left it alone. which makes it the perfect place for the Warden to hide. Almat knows of one way you may be able to get there despite the blocked path, but it's dangerous, which, that's no surprise. You have to go through the temple called the Katana Revel. It's been sealed off for centuries, but they can be opened since you're allies of Ran'ka. There's a bit of a process you have to go through to open the doors, and it starts at the Kamul Astropolis, and you have to figure out how to make it work on your own because while the Emperor set the Viera up to guard this stuff, he didn't tell him how to actually open the doors to it. Something about helping keep them from getting tempted to look through the place and stuff, which is kind of stupid. If he trusted them to guard it, he should have trusted them not to mess with it, but he didn't, so they can show you how to get there, but that's it. You and Y'shtola will handle that task with Almet, while the others will show Urianger, Thancred, and Minfilia around so they can search the woods, because just because the Rak'tika Falls is a likely hiding spot for the Warden, doesn't mean it's there. Turns out the Astropolis isn't open either, and the only way to get it open has something to do with the 4 monuments that were built nearby as tributes to the Guardians of Rak'tika. Y'shtola's not too happy about the whole puzzle thing, but after she looks at it, she realizes that it's similar to the one you had to solve at the lake to find the seal. And after doing a bit of looking around and comparing what you see to what's on Y'shtola's tablet, you solve the first puzzle, opening the door to the pyramid. Before you can head in to deal with the next set of puzzles, Semet comes running up to tell her sister that Eulmorean soldiers have entered Ixmaya. Y'shtola's first thought is of her people, but from what the scouts say, the Eulmoreans didn't care in the least about Slitherbough. As soon as they found the way into Ixmaya, they came straight for it. Thancred, Ulmet, and some others are fighting them at the border, so Almet sends her sister back to help. She doesn't want the Eulmoreans to get anywhere near Finau or the ruins. If Ran'jit is with them, your friends won't be able to hold him off for long, so you have to be quick. Inside of the pyramid, you run into another locked door, which irritates Y'shtola even more, but this one isn't all that hard to figure out. An owl-shaped statue is missing from by the door, but it's only been moved a few rooms over, which makes it a strange roadblock, but it doesn't matter because that statue opens the door deeper into the temple, where far more deadly traps await. Large stone guardians patrol the halls that have the power to curse you if they see you, something Almet warns you to avoid because the curses are deadly. But you barely make it out of the first room before Ulmet calls her sister using whisper weeds to let her know that 2 soldiers made it through their defenses and are heading toward the temple. Time is running out, so the 3 of you push forward, dodging more sentinels, some by using Y'shtola's shadow clone magic, and escape rooms filled with magic dampening poison, followed by a sprint from, you guessed it, a giant boulder. You knew there was no way you'd make it through an Indiana Jones style pyramid without at least one big rock trying to squish you. You survive, jumping down into an underground pathway only to get a call that not only did the 2 Eulmorans make it to the temple, Ulmet and Semet are barely keeping up with them, something that is unheard of. No one outruns Viera, which means it's definitely Ran'jit and his lieutenant who are coming after you. Sure enough, you get past one more door only to see them come running in from another side. How they get there so fast is a bit ridiculous, but it's video game logic, so just go with it. Maybe there was a back way in that you didn't know about, but if there was a faster route, the Viera should have known since they've been in the area forever. But there's no time to worry about it now, not when it's time to go another round with Ran'jit. You all start fighting, but Ranjit's old man strength keeps you from bringing him down, so the Viera chain him up while you and Y'shtola go further into the temple, grabbing the stone from the next room that deactivates the sentinels. Ran'jit overpowers the 3 sisters and turns his attention to you and Y'shtola. She actually holds off his attack, but the fighting stops when his number 2 steps on a trap that collapses the floor, trapping you all. He decides to strike up a deal. He'll give Y'shtola the antidote for the Poison Knight's Blessed, if when her people come to rescue the 2 of you, they agree to take him and Ran'jit. The general is not one to negotiate with his enemies, and since his second tried to, he kicks the man into the pit. Wanting to save her people, Y'shtola leaps into the pit, catching the antidote. She tosses it to you before falling, and leaving you alone to face Ran'jit. While Y'shtola's sacrifice was noble, leaving you alone to fight Ran'jit really wasn't a good idea. So far all you've managed to do is bruise his fist with your face, but fortunately Thancred, Minfilia, and Urianger show up. Since Ran'jit's distracted, Urianger has time to use the healer's most deadly technique on the general: rescue. He yanks the man into the opening, and to make sure he falls, Thancred catches him with a jumping attack that he can't avoid because Urianger pulled him right into Thancred's AoE circle. So what did we learn today, kids? Don't use rescue unless you want to kill someone. Back outside, Almet has bad news. The hole is so deep that they can't even figure out how long the fall would be, but it's unlikely anyone could have survived it. So while Y'shtola's probably dead, Ran'jit likely is too. Il Mheg comes running up with some better news at least. The Eulmorans have left the woods and retreated to Lakeland, but they poisoned more of the Knights Blessed during the fight. One of them was found near Xmaya, nearly dead. They brought him to Finau, and while the Viera can't do anything for him, you do have the antidote. Since Y'shtola was willing to die to save her people, you and Urianger head to Finau to heal the Blessed there, while Thancred and Minfilia head to Slitherbough with the rest of the antidote to help everyone else. The injured Blessed turns out to be Runar himself. He had fought the Eulmorans to help buy you time in the temple, and had got poisoned for his troubles. Fortunately, the antidote in Urianger's healing works on him. When he wakes, Thancred and Minfilia have made it back to the city, having cured the people in Slitherbough, and he immediately notices that Y'shtola isn't with him. When you tell him what happened, he does not take it well at all. In fact, he takes it far worse than you would expect. It's almost like his feelings for Y'shtola went deeper than just affection for a good leader. While you all mourn the loss of your friend, Almet and her sisters show up with an intruder, Emet-Selch. They captured him, but it wasn't in any great battle or anything like that. The Ascian was apparently sleeping under a tree and he woke up at spear point. Not knowing whether he was a companion of yours or not, the Viera decided to bring him to you before they poked holes in him. Needless to say, Thancred's not happy to see him, but you do share what happened since he asked. Retelling the story makes the Warrior of Light remember the strange gust of wind that came from the hole when Y'shtola fell. The same thing happened when she had teleported her and Thancred out of Ul'dah after the Scions were framed for murder ages ago, when she ended up lost in the life stream. The good news is, she's not dead. The bad news is it took a lot to summon her out of the life stream, and none of you have what it takes to bring her back. None of the Scions, at least. To prove that he meant what he said about working with you, Emmett offers to use his powers to bring her back. True to his word, the Ascian yanks Y'shtola out of the life stream, and even restores her glamour for her so she won't have to walk around naked. I don't know how many of the Scions would actually thank him for that part, but at least Alphinaud wasn't there to get an eyeful for a second time. He had enjoyed the last peek too much for Y'shtola's liking back in Heavensward. Everyone's happy to see her, but no one more so than Runar, who scoops her up in his arms and spins her around. The fact that she doesn't tear him a new one in typical Y'shtola fashion like she did Magni back on the Azim Steppe is proof that she may feel something for him too. We may never know, but all of that will have to wait for another day because you have more important things to do, like go to the Katana Revel and take down the Lightwarden. What you did at the pyramid should have opened the entrance to the Revel, and since Urianger didn't find any other likely spots for the Warden to be, it's time for you to get moving. The Revel is the oldest and most sacred of the Ronkan temples, so it contains the most of the nation's knowledge, and its strongest guardians. None of that will stop Y'shtola from studying it all after you see to the Warden, so, since there's nothing else holding you back, you all head into the Katana Revel. Saying the place is heavily guarded is an understatement. Giant golems, monsters, and wild animals all make their home in the ancient temple, and despite not being entered for thousands of years, the security systems are all still in place, and they're extremely dangerous, but they're nothing you and your allies can't handle. The temple leads to the Rak'tika Falls, and there you find the Lightwarden, a giant three-headed dog creature that does its best to eat you all. This is like the third or fourth time you've fought some form of Cerberus, but I guess since there's a Void Scent version of Tartarus's guard dog, it only makes sense that there'd be a Scent Eater version too. Still, you take it down, making it the third Lightwarden that you've beaten. Just like before, the light pours out of the Warden and flows into you, letting the night sky return to the Great Wood. The Warrior of Light seems to be fine, but Y'shtola doesn't think it'll last. The corruption of the light hasn't taken you yet, but it will, and she wants to at least warn you about what's happening to you. But she's not going to take away the joy of the moment with her worrying. Instead, she wants Urianger to describe to her what the night sky of the First looks like, because her damaged eyes can't make it out. Fortunately, one thing Urianger is an expert at is making his words come to life, and by the time you start making your way back through the temple, he's described it to Y'shtola so well that she can see the change as good as the rest of you. As you walk back through the Revel without all the monsters trying to kill you, Y'shtola notices that the murals on the wall here are actually older than the Ronkan Empire. She can't see them the way you can, but she can see the age of the paints used, and they're far older than anything else she's seen before. She wants to know what events the pictures portray, but right on cue, Emet-Selch shows up to interrupt your studies. Y'shtola accuses him of plotting something since he keeps staring at you and asking odd questions about your health, something he doesn't even try to deny. Again, semi-immortal, super powerful beings have no reason to lie about their intentions, and right now he's just gathering information. When he notices the murals on the wall, he actually recognizes the scenes. They show the world as it had been before it and its people were broken into the 13 shards and lost their memories. Very, very long ago, the world was a peaceful place that didn't know hardship until one day something happened and their paradise was thrown into chaos. To save themselves from the destruction, the people of that world prayed and sacrificed to summon a being to save them. That being was Zodiark, and he saved the people from the calamity. However, others were afraid of Zodiark's power, so they summoned something else to keep him in check. Hydaelyn. The two fought for a long time, until Hydaelyn drop-kicked Zodiark so hard that she shattered reality, leading to the shards splitting from the source and the people being split into what they are today. That means that Hydaelyn and Zodiark aren't gods at all. They're no different than the creatures you've been fighting for years. They are the first and most powerful of the primals, and the Ascians were the original race of people who summoned them. That's why they are so set on rejoining the shards. They want to restore their home and their people, bringing back the paradise that was lost to them, and undoing the disaster that caused you all to be created in the first place. With the fall of the Lightwarden and the Katana Revel and all of the stuff you heard from Emet-Selch, the time has come to head back to Finau to make sure the Eulmorans are actually gone. Il Mheg can't believe that killing one Sin Eater caused so big of a change, but she's happy that you showed up and proved to be the perfect people to pass on the knowledge of Ronka to. Of course, that doesn't mean their job is done. It is their duty to make sure the wrong people don't get into those temples, so they won't be leaving their posts anytime soon. Since the Eulmorans seem to be gone, you and the others head to check on Runar and the Blessed. When the night sky came, both the Eulmorans and the Children of the Everlasting Dark fled, and because of what you did, everyone who had been poisoned by the Children is recovered. Runar had suspected that you and the Scions were the Warriors of Darkness, but now both he and his people are certain. That still doesn't mean you all should be worshipped, but it does mean that you have a lot of work to do, and all of you, including Y'shtola, have to leave. Runar is not too happy about that part, but he understands. So all that's left is for Y'shtola to pack her things, and she drags you off to help her, but what she really wanted to do was talk to you about what's happening to your body. When you killed the Lightwarden, its ether wasn't destroyed by Hydaelyn's blessing. It's been absorbed into your body, and the more wardens you kill, the more danger you'll be putting your body into. So while you're fine now, if anything changes, she wants you to tell her ASAP, but for now it's time to head back to the Crystarium. You all make it back right when Alphinaud and the Exarch do. Alisaie is still nowhere to be seen, but they're happy to hear that you managed to deal with the Warden in the Greatwood. The questions turn to the Exarch's meeting with Vauthry, but being away from the tower has drained him so much that he decides that you all can continue this discussion after you get a bit of sleep. Of course, when you get back to your rooms, Ardbert's there. He heard everything about the light in you, but you don't look any different to him, and even if you did, all you'd really be able to do is hope your friends will have your back like you've had theirs. He does wonder if what Emmett was telling you about Hydaelyn being a primal is true, and whether or not that means her servants are just tempered. Emmett admitted that the Ascians who summoned Zodiark are tempered by him, so why would it be different for Hydaelyn? That of course only works if you believe the Ascian story, which Ardbert doesn't. The two of you talk well into the night until you finally fall asleep, and when you awake, sounds of loud noises come from outside, and you see that a horde of Sin Eaters are heading toward the Crystarium. You race off to see what you can do to help, only to run into the twins. Alisaie just got back, and she can't understand how so many Sin Eaters could be attacking in an area where you restored the darkness, but figuring that out will have to wait, even though Alphinaud has an idea on how it happened. The Exarch is turning on a barrier around the city, but if you all help it'll go faster, so you race off to activate the machine. The barrier kicks on not long before the first batch of Eaters reach the city. It holds them off, which is great, but it gives no protection for everyone outside of the city. Lena's already gotten the guard ready, and with Thancred and the other Scions, they're fighting the creatures. So you and the twins race off to join them. The minute you step out of the city, you see just how badly things are going. There are Sin Eaters everywhere, outnumbering the Crystarium soldiers at least 3 to 1. You and the twins jump into action, helping everyone you come across as you chase a large group of Sin Eaters that are heading toward Radisca's round. You come across the other Scions doing what they can to help turn the tide of the battle, but the Sin Eaters just keep coming. With a little bit of hardcore magic from Y'shtola and Urianger, you clear the round of Eaters and head toward the Astal Imperative. On the way you pass a lot of Sin Eaters that have already been dealt with by Thancred and Minfilia, again proving that little Minfilia is far more useful than our older counterpart. On your path to the Imperative, you see a large number of soldiers get taken down by one of the sword-wielding Angel Sin Eaters. Thancred and Minfilia head off after it, while you and the others head to the Imperative. The battle there is going poorly. The Sin Eaters are far too coordinated and strategic with their maneuvers for the attack to be random, but you and the others manage to even the odds. A little. Minfilia hears Lena cursing, and she charges in to see the guard being swarmed. She managed to save the woman, only to learn that the Eaters who were attacking her had been Lena's troops before they were turned by the Winged Eater, who swoops in to attack. Thancred jumps in to take the hit, and despite getting hurt, he brings down the Eater by himself. Ardbert looks on at the chaos, and when he sees some soldiers about to die, he tries desperately to help them, but he passes right through the creature and is forced to listen as the soldiers are murdered. However, with the Warrior of Light at the head of a group of soldiers, the Sin Eaters are finally driven back. When the dust settles, a lot of people are dead and even more are wounded, and Lena takes it hard. Having failed to protect her people after things were starting to look better, she feels terrible knowing that her friends will never see the world that you're working to create. To make matters worse, ships from Eulmore come flying overhead with Vauthry on board, blaming the people of the Crystarium for the attack. Had they left the Sin Eaters alone, the gods wouldn't be punishing them. But there's still time for them to surrender to him and come to Eulmore, where the Sin Eaters see them as family, until he decides to feed you to them or throw you off of a balcony. When he leaves, Lena asks you to thank Thancred and Minfilia for her. They're back at the Crystarium getting Thancred's wounds checked out. They were bad but not life-threatening, although Minfilia is taking it hard. She blames herself for being too reckless and weak. She thinks that if she was more like the other Minfilia, she'd be more useful. And that is the most laughable thing I've ever heard. A Realm Reborn Alphinaud was more useful than classic Minfilia. Young Minfilia is inexperienced, but she's not useless. The girl was supposed to be getting herbs for some medicine, a duty that she pawns off on you, so maybe she's more like the old Minfilia than she thinks. With Thancred patched up, you all go to discuss what to do next with the Exarch. You all get started talking, but you're interrupted when Emet-Selch comes in, complaining about the fact that he wouldn't have been late if you had told him you were having a meeting. Did I mention how much I love Emet-Selch? Dude is a great character. The Exarch's not bad either. I like how he looks at Emmett, hears him whine about being left out, and goes, "Anyway, so I was saying," like the annoyance of a god means nothing to him. It's the small things that make this story great. The support of the Scions saved a lot of people, but the way the Sin Eaters attacked is proof of something that people have suspected for a while. Vauthry wasn't joking about being able to control the Sin Eaters. He can really do it. Not like knowing that will make the Exarch surrender to him. That power doesn't just extend to the Eaters either. From what the Exarch learned from his visit to Eulmore, Vauthry can control the minds of people too. That was the technique he tried to hit the Exarch with before he realized he was talking to an illusion. And it would explain why the people in Eulmore act the way they do. As for the Lightwardens, Alphinaud didn't find the one in Kalusia, and while Alisaie found a possible hiding place for the one in Amarang, it would take weeks to explore the underground mines on the off chance that the creature is even there. Minfilia actually comes up with a solution. If she can unlock the full power of the Oracle of Light, she should be able to see the light ether coming from the Wardens. But she'll have to go to the place where Thancred talked to the original Minfilia so the powers can be unlocked. He doesn't want her to do it because he doesn't think she understands what might happen to her if she does, but Minfilia understands that she could be dominated by her past self and basically die. Hearing that this Minfilia wasn't actually complete lets Emet-Selch finally understand why she was so pathetic compared to the other reincarnations. The Oracle's powers are dormant in her body, but to use them her body and soul have to fuse with her past self. She'll gain incredible power, but she may be eaten by her past self, and Emmett wants to see what happens, something that makes Thancred so angry that he storms out of the room. Dangerous or not, it's the best idea you have, and one that Minfilia is determined to go through with, even if it means her death. Despite your best efforts, you can't talk Minfilia out of her plan to try to gain the power of the Oracle of Light. But Alisaie does have some bad news. She saw a Eulmoran airship land in Amarang, so going to Naboth-Arang, the place where the Oracle stopped the flood, will be a little bit rough. Not to mention that if you accidentally lead the Eulmorans to the inn at Journey's Head, where people are trying to help the people infected by the Sin Eaters, things will go very badly for them. Alisaie decides that while you all head to the Hills of Amber in the west of Amarang, she'll lead the Eulmorans off to an uninhabited area. Alphinaud and Y'shtola decide to go with her to help keep her alive, while you, Urianger, Thancred, and Minfilia head to Naboth as quickly and quietly as possible. Thancred's happy to see a village not far from where you're going, so he can get some information about what you're going to face on your path to Naboth-Arang. The Mord there are more than happy to answer your questions when they realize you're the one who spent so much money when you first came to the area, so that makes things a little bit easier. And it really makes me wonder just how much that coin the XR gave you forever ago was actually worth. The village is called Garrick, and it used to be the home to a lot of miners, but with the flood the people left, so the Mord turned it into a trading post, which means they can point you in the right direction. From what they say, the flood collapsed the mines surrounding Naboth-Arang, meaning the only way to get there without an airship is to use the trolley that used to travel to all the settlements in the area. But the trolley's locked behind a gate, which kept it from getting stolen by salvagers, but it also kept it from being used. From what Thancred learns, the Eulmorans are all over Amarang, but none of them are near the Hills of Amber, which means Alisaie's diversion is working. So with no better options, the trolley seems like the way to go. The problem with that is the gate has to be opened by a giant stone Talos golem, and as far as the Mord know, none of them are operational. But you have to travel to the Mount Biron mines where the trolley controls are to see if there's something you can do about that. At the mines you do find the trolley controls, but, as you should have expected, you have no idea what any of the stuff does. Everything's in good shape, like someone's been taking care of the place, but the levers that operate the cars and the tracks are way too heavy for any of you to even hope to move. There's a damaged Talos slumped over nearby that could be the answer to that. From the looks of things, there used to be a lot of them running around the area, and they were probably used to work the machines, but the things are broken, and Urianger can't figure out how to fix them. But someone has to know how to get them up and running again, and since Thancred saw a few people spying on you all, you could ask them, after you beat them up. Turns out they thought you were thieves there to steal scrap iron and stuff, but when they realize that you're interested in the trolley, their whole demeanor changes. Their names are Jarek and Thaf, and they're engineers who absolutely love the trolley, and they're working with some people to fix it just so they can see it get moving again. But it's not actually easy. The only person who really knows how to get it done is Magnus in the town of Twine, so they take you to speak with him. The entire town was built for people who built the trolley tracks and the miners who came there hoping to get rich. But with the trolley broken and the mines practically dry, there's no one really in the place anymore. The only people living there really don't have much going for them in their lives, and Magnus is one of those. He's drunk and doesn't know why you'd want to go to Naboth-Arang anyway, but that doesn't matter. The trolley's broken, and he doesn't want to talk about it or anything else with some people that he doesn't know. Since he's not going to be any help, you all split up and see if you can find help from some other people in the town. Jarek tells you that it's hopeless without Magnus, so you can either convince him or you're stuck. While you try to figure out what to do, you help him make a few minor repairs on the trolley tracks and get rid of a few birds that have made their homes in some inconvenient spots, while Jarek tells you more about the Hills of Amber and the people who used to live there. At first the people mined the area around them, but when they had depleted the resources, the Naboth Empire thought about using the Talos since they'd seen them working in other places. They hired some Makode engineers who specialized in working on the Talos, and things started to pick up immediately, and then the city of Twine was built. But all of that ended when the flood hit. The last members of the Daedalus Stone Works left and went to Eulmore 15 years ago, and now there's no one in the area who knows how to fix the Talos. At least there wasn't until Magnus and his wife came back 7 years ago. He had left because he wanted his son to grow up somewhere safe, but the Sin Eaters still killed him. His son had wanted to see the trolley run, so to honor his memory, Magnus and his wife came back and fixed things. It was going well for a while, but nothing lasts. There's still one Talos in the area that's close to being in working order that the people were working on, and Urianger thinks he can fix it with a few materials, which he sends you to get from some of the nearby stone creatures. Because he's Urianger, he gets it fixed, but he still can't turn it on. Its core is still dead, which Jarek already knew. They've been trying to find another one, but the last time they searched the mines for the special type of stone, Magnus's wife was killed in a cave-in. That's what made Magnus hate the trolley and everything associated with it. Even after Thancred tries to relate to him, that does little to help. So instead of waiting around, you and Thancred head into the mines to track down a new heart for the Talos. And with the help of some miners, some insects, and some smoke bombs, you manage to get your hands on the right stone. And not just any piece. Apparently Magnus's wife had found a piece when she was trapped under the rubble, and she had scratched a message into it for her husband, hoping that he'd find it one day. Seeing it makes Magnus even more depressed, and he lets you take it to restart the Talos. With the heart, Urianger gets the Talos up and running, and realizing that the time has come for her to head toward what might be the end of her life, Minfilia starts to panic. Urianger plays the dad role and goes to talk to her because he's much better at being sympathetic and dealing with children than the brooding Thancred. So the girl feels more comfortable venting her fears to him. She feels like she's a useless burden. She claims she could do more and actually be helpful, but she couldn't even help with getting the Talos up and running. And if she disappeared at that very moment, everyone's lives would be better. And the person she knows hates her the most is Thancred. She sees it every time he looks at her. She knows he wishes she were dead so the real Minfilia would come back. And honestly, she's not totally wrong. He does have a hard time fighting between missing the old Minfilia and protecting the new one. But she's a kid, so she can't understand the difference between him hating her and him seeing his failure to protect the original Minfilia every time he looks at her. She's a reminder of his own faults, so his hatred is honestly more for himself than it is for her. Urianger doesn't have the same problem expressing his emotions as Thancred, and he helps make her feel better by letting her know that no one is forcing her to do or be anything other than what she wants to be, not even the original Minfilia, and she'll be fine no matter what she chooses to do, as long as she stops being so hard on herself. You and Thancred hear everything, and while he wants to talk to her, he still can't bring himself to do it. Not yet. But he promises that he will. Eventually. Back at the Crystarium, the Exarch is watching you until Emet-Selch walks in. The Ascian would have followed you, but there's far too much light in Amarang for his taste. Plus, sometimes he just likes to sleep, something that I personally don't do nearly enough of. And apparently neither does the Exarch, because Emmet has yet to see the man even take a nap. He honestly wants to know how he does it, but the Exarch just adds that to the list of secrets he's keeping from everyone. And he has a lot of them. One of those secrets is very intriguing to the Ascian, because just like he built Garlean, he built the Allegan Empire too, and he knows full well what the Crystal Tower can and can't do, and there's nothing in the tower that would have let the Exarch summon you and your mortal body across worlds. The Ascian admits that he couldn't even manage to do that, and you saw how easily he pulled his Stola out of the ether. For him to not be able to do something, it must be very, very difficult. And Emmet is very interested in things that he can't do since there are so few of them, meaning he will definitely keep a close eye on the Exarch. With the Talos up and running, the time for the trip to Nabatharang is here. Magnus decides that since repairing the Talos was something his wife tried to do, he has to honor her memory by keeping it going. So he comes to help prep the trolley for your trip. With everything set, you, Thancred, and Minfilia hop into the cart, but Urianger decides to go and let Ishtola and the others know what you've done and bring them to help track down the Warden. Since the Talos will open the gate, he'll be able to meet the three of you in Nabatharang after he gets the others. So, the giant Talos pushes you guys off and begins towing you along the track toward Nabatharang. The trip is going smoothly until you come out of a tunnel and see the scarred-faced warrior Ran'jit standing on the tracks waiting for you. The man then proceeds to kick the trolley and the giant Talos right off the tracks. Now, I've heard of old man strength, but this is starting to get a little ridiculous. The man not only survived the fall, but he knew after you dealt with the other Lightwarden you'd be coming here in search of the next one, so he waited. If you had just sworn to Vauthry, he wouldn't have to kill you, but since you haven't, he tells Minfilia to wait right there while he kills you and Thancred. There's no avoiding the old man this time. A fight to the death is about to happen. And while you might expect things to turn out where the Warrior of Light faces down Ran'jit so Thancred can take Minfilia the rest of the way, Shadowbringers does things a little bit differently. Everyone has their moment, their chance to prove how important they are and earn their place as Scions of the Seventh Dawn. And after apologizing to Minfilia for how he made her feel, Thancred sends you on ahead with her so she can complete her mission while he goes one-on-one with the world's scariest grandpa. Ran'jit and Thancred immediately get to fighting, and the first thing you'll notice is that in all of your fights before, the old man's been holding back. He fuses with the monster that has been fighting with him, and after that, he gets even stronger. Thancred actually holds his own, proving two things. One, that he can really fight. And two, if he still had access to his ether, something he lost at the same time Y'shtola lost her sight, then he would be far closer to Ran'jit's level than he is. But even with his disadvantage, Thancred manages to injure Ran'jit enough for the man to teleport away, which is good, because Thancred was one more technique away from dropping dead on the battlefield. Thancred's fight gave you and Minfilia plenty of time to make it to Naboth-Arang, and she can sense the original Minfilia's power. As you get closer, the echo hits you both, and the two of you see the moment when the flood surged forward and the people ran for their lives. Minfilia appeared atop a tower and worked to push it back, the warriors of darkness appearing and giving their remaining life force to boost her power. Ardbert tries to do the same, but she stops him, saying that now's not the time for his sacrifice. He has a part to play, and when the time comes, he'll be the one that decides the fate of the world. The vision ends, but you and Minfilia are no longer in Naboth. You both are standing in an area filled with endless light ether, where you're greeted by the original Minfilia. It's a little creepy how much she looks like a reincarnation, but that is kind of the point, I guess. She's glad that she finally gets to talk to the young Minfilia so she could ask her what exactly she wants out of life. The girl has had a lot of time to think on it, and she wants to beat the Sin Eaters and restore the First. She believes that she could find the last wardens with the Oracle's power, something Minfilia says is totally possible. But the power she wants will come at a price, one that the young Minfilia says she's willing to pay to give the people hope for a better tomorrow. The Scions are fighting for it, and she wants to be able to help them. Hearing that her reincarnation has the same goal she once did puts a smile on your Minfilia's face, and she gives her remaining power to the small girl and fades away into oblivion, but not before telling you that you cannot accomplish your goals of saving the First alone, even though it seems like you're the only one capable of doing it. By yourself, you're going to fail. And that's it. The old Minfilia is dead and gone for good, and you and her heir reappear in Naboth. But the girl looks very different now. Her eyes no longer doing that creepy glowy thing, and her hair is red, making her look nothing like the old Minfilia. Now she's her own person, and free to live her own life. And she can see where the Lightwarden of Amarang is. She wants to head back to the others, but she is a little worried that Thancred will be mad that she's coming back and not his Minfilia. But if you're scared of something, it's best to dive in head first and get it over with, so you both head back to meet the Scions, although Minfilia does lag a little bit behind. You find them at the spot you had planned to meet with a very alive but extremely battered looking Thancred. He was apparently nearly dead when they found him, but their healing managed to keep him alive. When they see the new Minfilia, everyone's surprised by her appearance, and she apologizes for not pulling her weight and talks about all of the things that she can do now to be useful, but Thancred is just happy to see that she's okay. Regardless of what she thought he saw her as or how she saw herself, she was already one of you. Since she's starting her own life, she needs her own name. Minfilia is dead, and it's only right that her name dies with her. So everyone turns to Thancred since he's basically been a father to the girl. Ironically enough, he was the one who had renamed Asilia to Minfilia after her father's death, and now he gets to name her reincarnation. He decides to name her Reen, a word that means blessing in Fae, proving that Thancred actually does be listening when Urianger tells him things, although he plays it off to pretend like he's not interested in his friend's word vomit. Wouldn't want to encourage Urianger to talk more than he already does. Reen, of course, loves her new name, and is formally welcomed to the team. And her first act is to point you all toward the Lightwarden. It is underground, just like Alisaie thought, and the others have already found a way to enter the tunnels through a place called Malika's Well. It had been built to remember one of the ancient Naboth kings, and as a place to escape the desert heat. After the flood, it stopped being used, so the miners repurposed it into an excavation site. The underground pathways are huge, so it's a good place for a warden to hide, but Reen is positive that she can track it down, so you all make your way to the wells. The underground paths are as big as you thought, and of course they are not uninhabited. Animals and rogue Talos golems fill every part of the place, but you and the Scions fight your way to the depths where you come across the weirdest looking Lightwarden. The thing looks nothing like an animal or a person, It's more like a really big gold metal with wings floating around it. Weird looking or not, it tries really hard to kill you all, but it's brought down just like its friends, and you absorb the light from it. But this time, consuming the light hurts as your body works to contain it all. During the whole little absorption process, you almost look like you were about to transform into a Sin Eater. Just like before, the light ether shrouding the sky fades, and the night returns to Ohrani. With the Warden dead, the Eulmorans in the area head back to Kalusia to fortify the last bastion of light on the first, because they know that soon you'll be making your assault on Eulmore, because there is no way Vauthry will allow you to bring down the final Warden without a fight. And it will definitely be a big one. With the fall of the 4th Lightwarden, the Scions head back to the Crystarium to tell the Exarch what happened. The other Scions go on ahead, but Y'shtola wants to talk to you, and she wants Reen there too. Y'shtola wants to know whether or not Reen's new powers let her see anything strange about you, and she can. The light inside of you seems wrong, and it got worse after you beat the 4th Warden. Even as you talk, it starts to spasm slightly out of control. Reen thinks she might be able to suppress it, if only for a little while, but the only real hope is to rely on whatever secrets Urianger has, which means for now you have to rest while the others figure out what to do next, especially considering what might happen if the light explodes out of you. Ardbert is of course waiting for you in your room, and he wants to know what happened out in Ohrani. He's sad to hear that Minfilia is gone because it means he'll never figure out why she left him in the purgatory that he's in. It's not a question that you get to think long about, because the light starts to burst out of your body again, even worse than before. It brings you to your knees, and even though Ardbert hasn't been able to touch anything, he tries to help you up. Light seeps out of you into him, and the pain vanishes. That one action makes the Warrior of Light remember what Minfilia had told her, that no hero could do this alone. She starts to wonder if that meant Ardbert was supposed to help you, but he feels like he's the furthest thing from a hero. A knock comes at the door, causing him to vanish, and it turns out that the Exarch came to check on you. He's genuinely concerned about you, and he asks you not to die, which is something that I'm pretty sure you wouldn't choose to do if you could avoid it. There's still preparation that needs to be made to deal with the last Warden, and the Exarch will add in some time to look into healing you, but while he does, he wants you to rest. While you're asleep, the Echo shows you a strange vision of an unseen man reading a book in a building that's under attack. The entirety of Eorzea is in chaos, and so is the Far East. The world is beyond saving, and there's no hero who's going to show up and save everyone this time, but the speaker thinks it's possible to bring the hero back, if only he can deliver his message. The dream ends without really showing you much, so you head to the Ocular to meet the others to discuss the plan. The last Lightwarden is in Kalusia, and with Reen you'll be able to find it, kill it, and prevent the 8th Calamity. Y'shtola taunts Emet-Selch since his plans for the Rejoining are at risk, but he just laughs at the fact that you think getting rid of the Sin Eaters will actually save the world. At best, you're just delaying things, but he actually thinks your efforts are cute, so he'll let you try. But you're all short-sighted, something that he admits the Ascians were too. He takes over part of the Crystal Tower to once again show you all the story of his people and the summoning of Zodiark, but this time he gives you a little more information. They had imbued the planet with its own will, creating Zodiark and restoring order to the world. Then the people who were scared of his power summoned Hydaelyn, who had the power to attack not only your body, but your soul. So if she hits you, you'll shatter into multiple versions of yourself. They'd all look the same, yet they'd be weaker in every aspect than the original. Your power, knowledge, lifespan, everything will be divided by however many times the attack split you. So when she hit Zodiark, she split him, the planet, and its inhabitants into 14 pieces, the 13 shards, and the source. Only 3 Ascians, Elidibus, Lahabrea, and Emet-Selch were not split by the attack, and they got to see the ruined remains of their home and their people. Emmet's people shattered 14 times, were weak and stupid, and they didn't even remember what they had lost. Watching them was depressing, so the 3 Unsundered started trying to restore their people. Their first attempt failed, causing them to turn the 13th shard into a useless void. But then they learned of the connection between the source and each shard, and that led to their current method of putting the worlds back together with calamities. Y'shtola would sympathize with him if it wasn't for the fact that what he's doing is killing millions of people. But his counter-argument is simple. Every one of you is a shard of his fallen people. None of you are fully alive, so he cannot become a murderer by killing you. However, the Warrior of Light is potentially different since you've been rejoined with your original piece 7 times now, which not only explains your monstrous power, but it gives Emmett hope that he can use you to rejoin the worlds without all of the destruction. It's what he's been working on finding for a long, long time. He hopes you prove to be what he wants, but he won't know until you beat the Final Warden. Lena comes rushing in, interrupting your meeting with urgent news. Her informant in Kalusia sent word of unusual activity in Eulmore. They've placed their forces at key points in the city as they prep for an attack. So it seems like Vauthry has decided to move the last warden to Eulmore itself to keep it safe from you. Which makes sense, because without the Sin Eaters, its entire empire would crumble. Which means you all need to act fast before Eulmore can fortify itself more, so you all head to Right to see what you need to do to breach the city's walls. Out near Eulmore, Reen sees something, but she can't say if it's the warden until you get closer, so you go to meet up with the others in Gate Town. The people of the city are standing around not moving like living statues, which is more than a little weird. From this distance, Reen can see that a very, very powerful Sin Eater is at the top of Eulmore, but there's something odd about it, so she'll have to get even closer to figure out if it's actually the warden. Alisaie shows up with Kaishir, who she'd seen sneaking around when she was scouting the area. She attacked him, and he called her Alphinaud, so she decided to bring him with her, which is good since he was the informant who was sending information to the Crystarium. After you saved him, he stayed and spied so he could repay you, and he saw what happened in the city. When an airship landed in Eulmore, Vauthry started ranting and raving so loudly that you can hear him in Gate Town. When he stopped screaming, a hot wind blew through the area, and the people started to act strange. All but Kaishir. A few newcomers didn't change at first, but after a while they started mumbling about Vauthry too. But they still weren't as weird as the others. Y'shtola shows up and pulls out a piece of meol that she found among the villagers' things, and when Reen sees it, she freaks out. With a new power, she can see exactly what the meol is. It's made up of Sin Eaters, and if you eat too much of it, the Light Ether could alter your body enough for someone with Vauthry's powers to control you, and the people of Eulmore have eaten a lot of meol. The ones who've lived there for a while have at least, which would explain why the new arrivals weren't as strongly controlled. To make things worse, the fact that no one ever really leaves Eulmore could mean that the very Sin Eaters you've seen in the city and the ones who are turned into meol could have once been the very people who lived there. It's enough to make you all sick, and it's more than enough reason to deal with Vauthry even if the Lightwarden isn't in the city. So you and the Scions head into Eulmore to finally deal with the monster. Vauthry senses you coming, and he sends the possessed citizens to attack you. The Scions fight to detain them without killing them, while you make your way to the top floor, only to have your way barred by Ran'jit. He is one of the few people in the city who's serving Vauthry because he wants to and not because he's possessed, and he pulls out all the stops in your battle. But while Thancred was a good fighter, you're better. And Thancred hurt Ran'jit. You kill him. With the old man finally out of commission, you and the Scions finally confront Vauthry. The man seems to have had a mental breakdown, and when Reen sees him, she instantly knows that something is wrong. Vauthry is the Lightwarden, but he's nothing like the others. He's a weird Sin Eater human hybrid who claims he was born to save the world, and he won't let you interfere. He plans on fixing everything you've ruined once he finishes his meol. Reen screams for Thancred to stop the man from taking another bite, but he's too slow. Vauthry eats the meol and unleashes an inhuman roar that paralyzes you all. Then he sprouts some very tiny hummingbird wings that should have never been able to lift anything his size before he flies from the city. He uses his massive power to rip a large mountain from the ground and plants it in the sky to use as a new fortress. While you want to chase after him, Mount Gog was difficult to climb before it was moved, and now it'll take a long time before you can figure out how to get up there. In the meantime, Reen thinks she can free the people from Vauthry's control, so you all set out to help restore Eulmore while you come up with a plan to reach Mount Gog and take down Vauthry, the final Lightwarden. With Vauthry gone, Reen gets to work curing his victims. Her powers work wonders for reversing his mind control, but there are so many people that it takes a while to get to them all. You all pitch in and eventually restore everyone in the city back to normal. With the mind control lifted, everyone is confused, so Alphinaud fills them in on everything. He tells them about how Vauthry's promised paradise was a lie, and how the man was a Sin Eater who was using them all as puppets. The people of Eulmore don't take that news well, especially when Alphinaud lets them know that while Vauthry did control them during the attack, he wasn't controlling them before. meaning their terrible behavior, the murder and mutilation committed toward the lower class citizens, was all their doing. They can't change their past, but maybe they can change for the future. With his speech finished and the people safe, Alphinaud is ready to go after Vauthry. Surprisingly, the people of Eulmore want to help you go after their former leader, and since you have no idea how to actually get to the floating Mount Gog, any advice they give would be more than a little helpful. The only way to get to Mount Gog is over Brightcliff, and while you could do it by airship, if you're attacked by Sin Eaters while you're in the air, you'll likely die. That leaves the ladder, which is a really big elevator that the miners used to use before the flood, but once Vauthry took control, it was abandoned. Problem is, it needs Talos to run. Ironically enough, Dulia Chai's husband Chai-Nuz knows the golems very well since he's the heir to the Daedalus Stoneworks. He's not eager to volunteer for the job since he hasn't worked on a golem for years, but his wife's look of disappointment when he starts making excuses causes him to change his tune. He grabs a few people to do some heavy lifting and heads off to get the things out of storage, and you head off to join him. The ladder is to the north of Wright, not far from Eulmore, and when you arrive, Chai-Nuz has already gotten things organized. He has people working on the giant elevator, and since Y'shtola and Urianger are good with the arcane arts, he has them ready to charge up the two Talos once he has them prepped. They need a lot of materials, so they send you to the dry dock to the south to see if you can talk the people into sending a bit of lumber over for the project. Not only are they willing to send some wood, the workers offer to come and help too. It's a big job, and knowing what you'll have to do once it's all over, the Scions and the Eulmorans handle the heavy lifting while you relax and watch. Emet-Selch shows up, admitting that he never thought he'd see the day when the Eulmorans would do manual labor, not without forcing them the way the Alien Empire or Garlean would have. But while conquering someone is relatively easy, keeping the peace is harder. It takes sacrifice on the conqueror's part because they have to treat their subjects with dignity, and the conquered have to not hold a grudge over their defeat. And you manage to make all of that happen with a few words and kind deeds. Seeing everyone working together to reach a common goal almost brings a tear to the Ascian's eye, something the Warrior of Light didn't think possible, but he can feel loss and love just like you can. When the world was whole, his people knew peace and could live practically forever. There was no greed or hatred because their minor differences didn't overshadow all the things they had in common. And their cities, especially Amarat, were magnificent, from the poorest slums to the highest castles. Everything there was incredible. But he knows that you don't remember any of this, although he seems to think that you should. But in any case, he knows that you would have liked the world as it had been. With you being from the source, if you survive the remaining calamities, you'll become his equal, but he'll tell you more about that later. He does want to know if you've ever seen the Exarch's face, which no one has, a fact that Emet-Selch finds to be very interesting indeed. The Ascian leaves right when the Talos come back to life. It's a moment to celebrate, and even Ardbert shows up to join in. He thinks back on how he had nearly faded away when you first showed up, and he hadn't realized why until now. The stress of seeing the world he fought to save being nothing more than a ruin, and being powerless to stop it was weighing him down. Then feeling guilty over the fact that he had caused the flood in the first place didn't make things better, especially since he had to live alone with that regret for over 100 years. And despite what he thinks of the Ascian, if his own suffering was that bad after only 1 century, the way Emet-Selch must feel after tens of thousands of years has to be far, far worse. He said all of that to tell you not to make any choices that leaves you alone like them. The twins come running up to you, excited to say that the ladder is up and running again, and they're ready to take their first trip up with you. Now, I wouldn't have got on it first just in case it fell, but the Warrior of Light has no self-preservation skills. But she is a good person, and seeing how Ardbert longs to be a part of things, she invites him to take the first ride with her. He doesn't hesitate, because if it falls, it's not like he could die again. You all survive and make it to the top, only to catch sight of someone staring at you from nearby. When he realizes that he's been spotted, he runs off to a nearby village. Since it'll take a while for the ladder to bring the others up, you all go to see just why the guy was watching you. The villagers hide from you until the man who was spying on you realizes who you are. It's Crystal, the artist you saved after he'd been thrown out of Eulmore. Literally. The village is called Amity, and it's made up of all the people who survived getting kicked out of Eulmore. When he was wandering around after you all parted ways, Crystal ran into someone from the village. The man guided him through a tunnel that went to the top of Brightcliff, and he's been there ever since. It was peaceful until Mount Gog started flying and the ladder moved. He had thought you were people sent to destroy the village, but he feels better now that he knows it's only you. And when you tell him about Vauthry, it's a pretty easy story for him to believe. Regardless, if you need anything, just let him know. You and your friends are more than welcome to stick around while you figure out a way to get to Vauthry. While Alphinaud sticks around the village, you and Alisaie go to check out the mountain. There are a lot of Sin Eaters on your path, but the two of you deal with them and reach the base of the massive floating mountain. Seems like Vauthry has gathered all of the Sin Eaters he could to the area, and with the mountain being too high off the ground to climb, flying may be the only option. As the two of you discuss your options, Urianger and the Exarch show up with a few flying drones. He wanted to see this final battle firsthand, so he decided to come with you, and he brought new toys. As the drones head toward the mountain, an army of Sin Eaters fly out and destroy them. They never even get close, proving that you can't even attempt to fly up the mountain. So you all head back to Top Rung to try and figure out something else. Ironically enough, the idea for how to reach the mountain starts with Dulia Chai. Instead of trying to go up to the mountain, you need to bring the land up to it, with something like a giant Talos, one big enough to grab the mountain so you can climb up the Talos to reach Vauthry. It could work, but Chai Nu says that they've never made one half that big. Then, like a true crafter, he proceeds to absently lay out just how it could be done. But he needed an entire army to do it. People to gather the stone, which Reen and Thancred think they can get the miners in Amarang to do, and Alisaie can get the Moor to do the same. Alphinaud says he can get the crafters of Eulmore to work on that part too. As for the magic they would need to power the thing up, Y'shtola can gather enough of the Knights Blessed to do that part. And while Urianger would get the Fae to help, they're more likely to try to tie all the people together to make a ladder out of them instead, so he decides to get the people of the Crystarium to help, something that the Exarch has no problem with. The fact that you all casually claim you can gather pretty much the entirety of Norvrant to help with this makes Chai Nu's wonder just exactly who you all are. His surprise is understandable, since it is the first time he's dealt with the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. When everyone else heads off to gather their allies to work on the giant Talos, the Warrior of Light and the Exarch start helping Chai Nu's get started. The man is having a panic attack, which makes sense since the job he's doing is so big. If he fails, then all hope of stopping Vauthry and saving the First will end, so the pressure is definitely getting to him. Before he can even get started, he needs to know more about the area, but there aren't any people around that he knows about. Of course, when you tell him about Amity, that gets rid of that excuse. However, a village filled with Eulmoran exiles isn't exactly a place that'll be friendly to someone like him, which makes the man panic even more. But after telling him about how inept Alphinaud used to be, something he can't believe seeing how well the boy deals with people and problems now, that helps motivate him a bit. He's still worried about the villagers, especially when he finds out that Tristol is one of them. He did practically sentence the man to death, so it makes sense that he'd hate him, just a little bit. But the Warrior of Light not only persuades Chai to try apologizing, but she convinces the man that even if he fails with the Talos, she'll still protect everyone. So he decides to head to Amity to apologize and try to get the villagers to help. And despite the danger, Dulia plans on sticking by his side the whole way. Tristol is of course not happy to see the people who had him thrown over the side of Eulmore, but the fact that Chai not only apologized but is trying to help you all stop Vauthry makes the man at least agree to work with them. But forgiveness will be a long time coming, if it ever does. Since that part's out of the way, Chai gets started on his design, so he'll have something done when the others get back. But he did forget something important. Talos need a heart to run, something you had to spend a lot of time finding for a regular sized Talos. To get this one running, you'll need just a little bit more than before. The heart has to come from the area where the stone that makes up the Talos' body comes from, and it turns out that Tristol knows some people in the area who can likely help you find some. There are dwarves in the area, and they know the land very well. It was a dwarf that showed him the tunnel that had led him to Amity, so they'll probably be willing to help, if you give their chief Zamat the proper greeting, of course. The Exarch is curious to see the dwarves' village, so he comes with you since he seldom sees dwarves at the Crystarium. One of them sees the two of you, and after you give their strange lolly-ho greeting, which is the best wave in the game, he wants to know why you're in Tomra. When he finds out you're looking for Zamat, it turns out that you already found him. And since you came from Amity, he wants to hear your story because it's probably a good one. When he finds out you fought Vauthry, he's shocked because he was positive that everyone who lived down below had given up on pretty much everything. But while it's good that you want to fight, he doesn't have a clue about how to deal with the flying volcano and its Sin Eater army. Still, he's definitely willing to help. However, their ore is precious to them, so he has to test you to make sure you're worthy. The test is a Thole tradition and has absolutely nothing to do with anything other than teaching you what dwarves the Thole tribe doesn't like and having you shoot them with a slingshot. Like I said, it has nothing to do with anything. But you need their help, so you do what you have to. Once he's satisfied, Zamat agrees to help you. The ore you need is called Earthseed, and it's rare, but not that rare. You can find it at a place called Duragar's Tool, but the place is occupied by the Gogs, the tribe of dwarves that the Thalls hate, and they won't let anyone else near the place. So if you want the ore, you have to deal with them. If it turns into a fight, you and the Exarch can handle the dwarves easily. Now if it was a drinking contest, that'd be a different story. No one beats the dwarves at drinking. Of course, even if you deal with the Gogs, you still won't know what the ore you need looks like, so Zamat wants to send someone with you. The dwarf Korut overhears and volunteers. When he heard that the last Lightwarden was at Mount Gog, he felt it was his job to help out. And if it was just a mining job, he'd be the best one for it. Problem is, when it comes to fighting, Zamat says the boy couldn't hit the side of a minecart if he was sitting in it. Lucky for him, you and the Exarch are no strangers to combat. You'll be able to keep the dwarf safe no matter how many Sin Eaters attack. And a whole lot of them attack. The Exarch seems excited to fight with you, and Korut notices that the two of you work together like you've done it before. Of course, the Exarch avoids making any comments that could reveal who he is, so he doesn't say anything. When you reach the mines, there are even more Sin Eaters waiting for you, and one of them very nearly kills you. If not for the Exarch's extreme power, it would have been the end of the Warrior of Light. But with the creatures out of the way, the path is clear, so you all head into the mines. There are a lot of Gogs there, and since they won't take kindly to you all digging around, Korut wants you to just kill them all. But the Exarch has a less violent solution. He turns you both invisible and gives you a bit of dream powder to knock out a few of the dwarves. It works wonders, and you manage to get the ore that you need. All of the spell casting seems to hit the Exarch hard, but none of you get a chance for a break because Glag, the chief of the Gog, shows up. Him and Korut immediately start arguing and trading insults, so the Exarch hits him with some dream powder to put him to sleep too, and you all head back to Tamra. While you were gone, it turns out that a few more dwarves decided that they wanted to help you out too, so they modified some mining picks for you all to use to get the other materials you need. They give you a lot, which is good because the others brought a lot of people to Top Rung to help, and apparently more are on their way. Seems like everyone wanted to do their part to bring down Vauthry, which is good because you'll need all the help you can get for what's coming next. Since you've handed out the mining tools and gotten the ore for the Heart of the Talos, you and Alphinaud head to Amity to see how Y'shtola's coming with imbuing the Talos with ether. She's gathered together everyone she needs for the process and has sent them to their positions since Chai-Nuz has everything ready on his end, despite the fact that he still doesn't think he's doing it right. The Exarch did drop off the ore he needed for the heart, and he almost has it ready, although he's going to have to do a little extra work to make it pump ether through something that big. Y'shtola has something that might help power the thing. The Knights Blessed brought their Hearthstones, which are filled with magic, and you can imbue them with even more. The stones are sacred to the Blessed, but using them to help bring the Knight back to the First is a goal they can get behind, so they're more than willing to part with their sacred stones. After Y'shtola gets you to imbue one of the stones with ether, Chai-Nuz lets her know where to put the stones to help power the Talos, and she gets ready to head off to do just that. Once the Talos moves, the climb up Mount Gog will be rough, so Alphinaud recommends you get a bit of rest. They don't want you to overtax yourself and explode or anything. Everyone heads off to do their task, but Y'shtola stops Urianger. She wants to make sure that he does in fact have a plan to save you if your body can't contain the Final Warden's light. Of course, this gets your attention too, and your friend admits that he indeed does have a plan to save you, and the tools he needs to do the deed are in the area, but he can't let you know what it is too early or the plan will fail. The answer is enough to satisfy Y'shtola, because while Urianger hides things, he's not a liar. If he says he has a plan, then he does. It's almost done. The Talos just needs to be filled with ether and it'll come to life. Then your attack can begin. Which means you really do need to rest. The Exarch is supposed to be doing the same, but he's not in the tavern where he should be. You find him sleeping by a rock outside of Amity. The village is run down, but I'm pretty sure their pillows are softer than bricks. The man claims he just wanted some fresh air, but he'd fallen asleep. Being away from the Crystal Tower for so long drains him. When he had first decided to work towards saving the world, he had realized that he'd be long dead before he completed the job, so he merged himself with the tower so he could live forever. The only catch is that he can't travel too far away from the tower, and his body seems to be turning into a crystal too, which I think is a little more serious than his travel restrictions. But because of you, his mission is nearly completed. Since you have nothing to do but wait, the Exarch wants you to sit with him and talk for a bit. He wants to know what you plan on doing once this whole Lightwarden thing is over, and of course you'll be getting back to the war with Garlean, since technically Stormblood didn't end before he kidnapped you and started Shadowbringers. Regardless of what you decide to do, what adventure you plan on going on next, the Exarch believes you'll make the lives of everyone around you better. However, he still won't give you any more than vague answers about himself. The only thing he tells you is that he does have a friend that he always hoped he'd get to go on another adventure with, since he learned so much and had so much fun the last time. But he won't be able to do that if you don't win the next fight, so it's time to head back to Amity to see if the Talos is ready. Back on the first, Elidibus, who is currently running around in Xenos' body, lets Varys know that he's gotten rid of the rumor that his son is possessed by a devil, despite the fact that it is technically true. And since the nation's at war, those rumors won't come back anytime soon. Varys is still curious about where Emet-Selch went, so Elidibus lets him know that the Ascian went to the first, but didn't share his plans since the man prefers to work alone. And figuring out his plans are pretty much impossible, something that Varys knows firsthand since he spent a lot of time being manipulated by the man. Emmett did share some valuable information, however. He told them why the Scions of the Seventh Dawn haven't been fighting with the Eors in alliance. Their most prominent members have had their souls trapped on another world. With their souls out of their bodies, the Garleans could wipe them out before the Warrior of Light comes back, then they could kill her as soon as she reappears, solving all of their problems at once. Elidibus tries to get Varys to send the full might of the Garlean army at the unconscious Scions, but before the man can make his decision, the real Xenos shows up in the body he took after his death. Elidibus is surprised that Xenos could figure out how to gain true immortality with the borrowed echo that he has, but how he got the ability is irrelevant. He wants his body back, and he has every intention of forcing Elidibus out of it one way or another. Back on the first, the time has finally come. The Talos is ready, so Chinooz gives the command for the magic users to power it up. When the thing starts to rise out of the ground, it is a sight to behold. It's enormous, easily the size of a mountain itself, and it reaches up to grab Mount Gog out of the air just like it was meant to. There's one problem though, one that I don't see how the Scions didn't actually plan for. The Sin Eaters surrounding the mountain start destroying the Talos' hands. Lucky for you all, Titania shows up to help, and the Fae King isn't happy that you once again forgot to call when you needed help. It doesn't matter that the Fae said they didn't care about mortal affairs. Titania is still very upset that you didn't call. So the Pixie King is probably going to do something very, very unpleasant to you after the Sin Eaters are dealt with. With the arrival of the Fae, the Talos is able to latch onto the mountain, giving the Scions a straight shot up toward Vauthry's fortress in the confrontation with the last Lightwarden. If you thought there were a lot of Sin Eaters floating around outside of the mountain, that's nothing compared to how many are there to block your path once you start your climb. Vauthry sends all the forces he has to stop you, but you and the Scions slice through his pets as you make your way to the top. Outside of the gates to his chamber, you face his consort, a powerful Sin Eater who does everything she can to keep you away from her master, but she too falls at your hands. However, Vauthry has even more troops to send your way, so your group has to make a decision. They decide to leave Vauthry to you while they hold off his horde. Without arguing, you leave your friends to fight while you rush up the stairs to face off against Vauthry in a final battle for the fate of the first. Vauthry is nothing to be trifled with. The former leader of Eulmore is powerful, and he turns all of his abilities on you. Still, he's never fought someone like you before, and the battle pushes him so far that the light surging through him transforms him into an anime villain who unleashes even more devastating attacks against you. But the mistake he made was calling himself a god and not realizing you've been overpowering gods since you first joined the Scions, and he's another one that gets his name written in your death note. Having lost, Vauthry starts to pout and cry about how he was the hero and he shouldn't have lost to villains like you. His dad told him that he was hope incarnate, a god meant to save the people. That was the whole reason he was born as both a Sin Eater and a man, but that doesn't stop him from breaking apart and having his light absorbed by you. As the light fills you and the sky goes dark, the echo shows you an image of Vauthry's parents. His father was the leader of Eulmore who saved the people from a Sin Eater raid, but apparently his methods were so harsh that the people had started complaining. He was upset over their lack of gratitude, and while his wife stands by and listens to him rant, Emet-Selch shows up to offer not only his sympathies, but a solution. He has a way of solidifying the mayor's reign by bringing a Lightwarden and merging his power with the child growing inside of his wife's womb. Emet will make sure the man's son has power over the Sin Eaters, and as the boy's father, his rule will be absolute. The man agrees, and when Vauthry is born, even as a swaddled infant, he can control the most powerful of Sin Eaters, making it easy for them to rule the people. When the vision ends, the light begins to consume you. Y'shtola sees that you're turning into a Sin Eater, so she tells Urianger that whatever he's planning, he'd better do it now, but the man doesn't move. The darkness that had been returned to the sky vanishes, once again consuming it by light, and Alisaie starts to run to you since Urianger won't do anything, but the Exarch shows up. He knew that the combined power of every warden would be too much for any one person to contain, so he plans on taking it from you. What he starts to do to you seems mighty shady, so Y'shtola gets ready to attack him, but Urianger stops her. This had always been the plan, and it was the only way to save you. The Exarch plans on absorbing all of the light from you and using the crystal tower to teleport into the rift between worlds, where he'll explode, freeing the first from the excess light and saving you, the shard, and the source all at the same time. As the light continues to flow into him, the power blows his hood off, revealing the face of a friend you hadn't seen since he went into the crystal tower on the source and sealed the doors behind him. Rak'tika. Everyone's favorite catboy was always willing to sacrifice himself for what he felt was the greater good, and there can be no greater good than saving the Warrior of Light. A single gunshot puts an end to all of that as Emet-Selch shoots G'raha in the back, dropping him and interrupting the transfer. He had known that the Exarch couldn't have been from the shard because the Elegant Eye needed to control the tower didn't exist anywhere other than the source, which meant the Exarch and the tower had appeared on the first together. Emet had figured that much out, but he couldn't figure out the man's plan. Seeing how he did all of this just to save one person is laughable, but he will commend him for his efforts, even though the Ascian wasn't going to sit by and let anyone interfere with his plans. The Exarch isn't dead, but if the Scions attack, then Emet will finish him off. As for you, he's extremely disappointed in the fact that you couldn't contain the light, which means you're not worthy of working with him on the Rejoining, a plan he's been working on for a while in regards to the first. 100 years ago, he'd given Logrif the mission of shifting the first ether toward the light aspect, but when she failed, Emet had made Vauthry, which, because of you all, his plans for him failed too. But he was willing to let that go to see if the Scions were worthy of becoming his allies. But all of that was contingent on you being able to contain the light. If the best of the Scions couldn't be useful to him, then that meant the rest of the group wouldn't be either. Of course, even if you had lived up to the Ascians' expectations, there was no guarantee that the Scions would have worked with them, as Thancred points out. Of course, then Emet would have just killed you all and returned the first to how it was before you started murdering wardens. Now, if the Exarch had managed to take the light from the world, that would have been a problem, so he couldn't let that happen. Your transformation continues, on the inside at least, but Emet finds it interesting that you're still able to keep your senses and your form. For now. But it doesn't matter. Your very existence is going to keep the world shrouded in light, and the longer people stay around you, they'll start to turn into Sin Eaters too. And eventually, you'll lose yourself to the hunger for ether, and you'll start to hunt people for food. And it would have been hard for people to fight you before, but adding the combined power of all the Lightwardens to your current strength will make you a creature that will ravage the world far worse than Vauthry ever could. Then the world will be ready for its rejoining. Emet gets ready to leave to watch the show, but he teleports the Exarch away first. He spent a lot of time with you all and he doesn't have anything to show for it, but the Exarch has learned some things that even Emet didn't know, so questioning the man may prove valuable. He goes to leave, but in an act of mercy he tells you that when you finally accept what's happening to you, come to his home in the Tempest. That way you can at least have some privacy while you become a monster. With those final words he leaves, and the Warrior of Light passes out. You awake back in your room in the Crystarium, where Ardbert is waiting for you. After you passed out, Reen did what she could to slow the changes the light was making to you, but it's only temporary. To make matters worse, the sky around the Crystarium is once again shrouded in light, just like it had been before. And it's not just there. The entirety of Navran is back to the way it was when you first started your quest. And you're the source of that light, a fact that your friends kept secret from everyone else. And now they're out trying to keep the people calm while looking for a way to save you. Something that seems like an even more impossible task than your hunt for the Lightwardens had been. The manager outside of your rooms in the Crystarium is surprised to see you awake after how you got carried in from Mount Gald. You look dead. And with the sky changing back, he hadn't really expected any good news, so he's happy to see that you're up. Seeing you awake might help ease the worries of your friends around the city, so he tells you to go and check in with a few of them so you can let them know that you're okay. Bragi had swung by to visit you a lot while you were out, and he's happy to see that you're on your feet. He'd helped carry you in, and you'd had as much life in you as a corpse. He only knew you were alive because you were still breathing, a little. They told him that not only were you almost dead, but the Exarch got kidnapped too, so things are pretty bad. The only good thing is the fact that trade with Eulmore is back on, so the city won't be hurting for supplies anytime soon. Chesamil was worried about you too. Since she's a healer, she had wanted to help you, but the Scions kept everyone away from you. Reen did tell her that you were showing symptoms of Sin-Eater corruption, so it wasn't like she could really do anything for you anyway. She's seen the Scions running all over the place trying to find a cure for you, but from the looks on their faces, they haven't had any luck. Morin has been going through every book in the Cabinet of Curiosity trying to figure out why the light came back even though all the Lightwardens are dead. He hasn't found anything, and under normal circumstances he would have gone to the Exarch, but with them gone he kinda can't do that right now. So he's glad that you're back on your feet so you can get to searching for the Exarch. Before you do that, he wants you to go see Catelys. She's getting all the crafters working on prepping everyone for the fight that's coming, even though she doesn't know who they'll actually be fighting. When she sees you, the first thing she does is check your gear. She thinks that if you had better equipment, then you wouldn't have gotten hurt so badly. I don't think your gear has anything to do with that, but she's trying to help however she can. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the skill to make your equipment better, but Grunald, the Geralt of the First, could. If you could find him, which is unlikely since the man has been gone for years. The Warrior of Light must still look ill because looking at you makes Catelys tell you that you should find a spot and relax. But instead of going to bed, she tells you to try the spot at the top of the watchtower in the Rookery because that's where the Exarch used to go, and he'd always seemed less stressed when he came back down. Going there to clear your head can't hurt, even though the sight of the corrupted sky is not all that soothing, especially knowing that you're the one that's causing it. Ardbert comes by to talk to you to make sure that you don't tell the people that you're causing the light, because while that might make you feel better, it won't help them at all. He actually gives you a pep talk, and if anyone can relate enough to make you feel better and not give up, it's him. The man caused the flood, but instead of giving up, he sacrificed his own life to travel to the source to try and fix things. But there were points in time where he had wondered if they would have been better off just letting the rejoining happen. But when he saw the giant Talos come to life, and all of you working together to save the First, he realized that it was all worth it. He was happy about the part he played, and he puts out a fist to see if he truly has a part to play in your story too. You touch his fist, and like before, the light inside of you starts to resonate with him. He does have a part to play in your tale, and now he's willing to do it. Whatever you need, he's got your back until the end. He fades away as Feo Ul shows up to check on you too. The Pixie had expected you to be brooding, but you seem to be in good spirits. But the Pixie can see your ether and your soul, and they are both very badly damaged. Feo can't heal you, but your friend does make you an offer. The Pixie King is willing to give up the title and powers of Titania to make you the new immortal leader of the Fae. It won't stop you from becoming a Lightwarden, but if anyone attacks you, the Pixies would be there to protect you. It's an offer that Feo never would have expected you to accept, but you do have an issue that you need to solve. Feo believes you can do it if you use all the tools at your disposal, and the Crystal Tower itself is a major tool. The Exarch used this knowledge for decades, and there's definitely some information he has tucked away in there that could possibly help you find answers. Of course, there's one person around who can tell you more about what the Exarch's been doing in the tower for all these years, and that's Lena. The Exarch raised her after her parents died in a Sin-Eater attack, so she knows the man better than anyone else. Lena hadn't seen you since you got carried back to the city, so she's surprised to see you're even awake at all, let alone moving around. That means it's gotten closer to the time to rescue the Exarch. She had wanted to go after him immediately when your friends told her that they knew where he was, but after she saw you, she realized how bad of an idea charging off without a plan would be. Before the Exarch left, he had given Lena a key to the room at the heart of the tower where he never let anyone else go. He told her not to let anyone in, and she's only supposed to go in the room if the city gets attacked by Sin-Eaters. The controls for the barrier that he put up around the city are there. He'd never given her those type of instructions before, so she knew that whatever he had planned wasn't going to end well for him. She wants you to tell her the truth about what you're all fighting, but telling her won't really help, and any information you give might lead to her figuring out what happened to you and the light. Even though you can't answer her questions, she decides to let you into the heart of the tower. Her knowing that you're the Warrior of Darkness helps motivate her just a little bit, but even though she opened the door for you, she still won't go in. The central room is filled with thousands of books, but looking around does what you had hoped for. It makes the echo show you a vision. This time you see G'raha and Urianger talking. Turns out Urianger hadn't seen a vision of the 8th Umbral Calamity at all. G'raha actually came from a time a few centuries after that calamity happened. He explains it all because he wants Urianger to work with him. He told him of how Sid worked until the day he died trying to figure out a way to prevent your death, and the discovery came when they thought about the time-traveling powers you encounter when you dealt with Alexander, which is another very important story that I have to cover on the channel. Coming up with the idea was one thing, but it took future generations to actually start putting it into motion, which was hard because the world was facing the chaos of a never-ending war. Still, the Ironworks members worked, and after 200 years they finally learned how to open the Crystal Tower, which was a major part of the plan, and by opening the door, they woke G'raha. By the time they opened the tower, the scholars had figured out how the Rejoining had worked, and learned that the first was the shard that led to the calamity, so that was where they needed to go to prevent all of this from happening. The Crystal Tower could easily store the energy needed for the trip, and after adjusting some of its functions to match their discoveries, it was time. However, tracking time flow is difficult, and he landed on the first 100 years before he was supposed to, which ended up being a good thing because it would take decades to get prepared for the Warrior of Light to be brought over. Urianger immediately figures out the flaw with G'raha's plan. He only exists because of the 8th calamity, so if it's prevented, then he would just vanish. At least that's what they think would happen. Now this whole thing could lead to a time paradox, but there are always around that, but I'm not going to get into them here because it'll be easier to put that in a video of its own. Just know that G'raha is perfectly fine with erasing himself if it fixes things, as was everyone else who chose to work on this seemingly impossible mission. And it was all because of how the Warrior of Light constantly put herself in harm's way for other people. But that self-sacrificing nature is the one thing that can interfere with the plan, which is why the Exarch recruited Urianger and had him lie to you, because there was no way that you would ever go along with letting G'raha die to save you, even though interfering would mean the death of an entire world. Which is why it had to be kept a secret, and Urianger is more than willing to keep secrets from his friends to manipulate them into doing what they should. And he agrees, knowing full well how the Scions might hate him for keeping something like this from them. Seeing that vision does little to ease your temper. Knowing someone lied to you tends to do that, but Ardbert warns you that getting upset might make you turn into a Sin Eater, so you should probably calm down and focus on something. And that something is going to the Tempest to save the Exarch, so you can tell him just how unhappy you are about his little scheme. After learning the truth about what the Exarch and Urianger had done, the Warrior of Light gets started on trying to find a way to the Tempest, alone. However, the Scions catch up to you while you're trying to get an armor roll for your flight out there. Because of the glare you give to Urianger, he realizes that you already figured out what he was coming to tell you. He's already told the others, and he doesn't make any excuses for what he's done. Whether you forgive him or not, he'll understand. But to be honest, being mad at him would be irrational. You got to see the entirety of what happened, and why he made the decisions he made. He wasn't being malicious, he wasn't trying to hurt you, and he was right to keep it from you, which is something you can accept. But having any of the Scions around you is a danger to them now that you're one step away from becoming a Lightwarden and either killing them or turning them. Regardless, Urianger wants to stick with you to the end. Reen doesn't think you doing anything is a good idea. What she did to hold back the light is temporary, and when it breaks free, you will transform. She wants you to wait just a little while, and she promises that she'll find a cure, but Alisaie cuts her off because she doesn't want to hear any more lies. They've done everything they can and haven't gotten any closer to saving you. It really hurts her that after everything you've done for them, that the one time you needed them to save you, they all failed. So she plans on doing the one thing that she can, and that's dying by your side. And the rest of the Scions, including Reen, agree to do the same thing. Lena shows up right before you all leave with all of your friends from the city in tow. They're all eager to help now that she's told them that you're the Warrior of Darkness. Granted, it's not like they're dumb. The people suspected it the day the Exarch actually left the tower to greet you, and the fact that the night sky returned everywhere you went was another dead giveaway. There's no point in turning down the help, nor is there any reason to share your gloomy mood, so you tell them to defend the Crystarium until you bring the Exarch back home safely. As for your plan to fly an Amuro to the Tempest then swim down to Emet-Selch's fortress, Urianger in so many words says that it was stupid, and just because you can breathe underwater doesn't mean you can swim forever. But he has a better solution, one that they found while trying to find a way to heal you. He breaks down what you need to do, and honestly, I don't think the Warrior of Light thought any of this through. You're headed to the ocean floor, but you need to be able to both breathe and fight without being hindered by the water. There's a Fae that has that type of power, although Urianger hasn't met it yet. Instead of trying to explain it to you, he takes you all to an island, all the while reminding you that he can't swim at all, before pointing out that the island is the Fae, and is Norvrant's version of Bismarck, the flying whale god of the Vanu. Urianger wants it to take you all the way to the Tempest and push the water away with domes of air, like the ones under the Ruby Sea around Suino Sato and the city of the Ninja Turtles, I mean the Kojin. Of course, things can't ever be simple, and Bismarck tells you that he doesn't really feel like taking you anywhere, and he's going back to sleep. But he's a Fae, and for once the Warrior of Light remembers to call Feo Ul, who is super excited to finally get asked for help. Feo's also glad to see that you haven't given up on living yet, and being the king of the Fae, all it takes is a word, and Bismarck eagerly agrees to help you. The giant Fae dives into the water, nearly murdering some lumberyard workers with a giant tidal wave because they didn't think that a creature the size of a meteor slamming into the ocean would make the water move. Bismarck brings you to the ocean floor on a ride so rough that you all get knocked unconscious, but you wake in an area where the Fae push the water away so you can make your way to Emet-Selch at last. Of course, nobody thought to ask a very important question. Even if you win, how will you leave the Tempest? And no, your friends can't just click return to go home. Without ether rights to travel through, teleporting all willy-nilly makes you end up like Y'shtola. Of course, you have to survive for that to even matter. The Exarch and Emmet are definitely down there somewhere. While Ascians can teleport into the rift between dimensions, they can't do it while carrying a hostage, not without that hostage dying. And since the Exarch's body is the key to the Crystal Tower, Emmet wouldn't want to hurt his prize, so all you have to do is find them. Emmet being a bit bougie, he's not likely to just be sitting out in open water, so you and the Scions start to search around to see if you can find some type of fortress fit to house an Ascian. While you're looking around, you spot a young Ondo who freaks out when he sees you and runs off, so naturally you all follow him. Alphinaud is surprised to see that the Ondo live down here, but he immediately steps into his role as a diplomat, but they're not all that happy that you remove the water, so unless you're the emissaries of the Ancient Ones, you can leave. Since you don't even know what they're talking about, that means you're not what they want. But they know the Ancient Ones are sending someone since they recently saw lights turn on in the depths. But they're not going to talk to you, so you all leave to come up with a plan. The Tempest is a big place, so if you could get the Ondo to help you, then it would make finding Emet-Selch a whole lot easier, especially since he's probably in whatever the place the Ondo claimed to see lights. Fortunately, what seemed like a lifetime ago, Alphinaud was working on trading with the Ondo, and he managed to strike up a deal with one despite their different customs, meaning that method could work again. Which means you all have to do chores for the Ondo. Y'shtola thinks working with the creatures might be the best plan because she has a strong feeling that the creatures have a deeper connection to the Ascians than you might think. She's going to study them while the others do random things to increase their reputation with the Ondo. Alphinaud actually finds the one Ondo he had done the deal with, and the creature gets you to deal with some crabs for his people. Normally they could outswim the things, but since the water's gone, they can't outrun them anymore. The creatures are easy for you and Alphinaud to deal with, although the Ondo is surprised you were even able to break their shells. As a reward, he tells you a little bit about his people. Before the flood, their ancestral home was far to the south. The flood destroyed it, and the only people who survived were the Ondo who were out hunting at the time. They swam until they found weird buildings on the ocean floor that weren't damaged by the passage of time or the underwater current. The buildings gave the Ondo a safe place to live away from the predators of the Tempest and the dangerous waters. The first Ondo to find the place thought they had been guided by the gods to the city because the only people who could have built the indestructible buildings had to be gods, and they had led the Ondo there to be the caretakers of their land until they returned. Which means that the Ondo start to believe the Ancients sent you, then they'll start to treat you like royalty. Which basically means keep helping them to prove your worth and they'll warm up to you. When you tell Y'shtola what you learned, she's super excited because it adds to her own research. She has a theory that she wants you to help her test about some of the buildings that are scattered around the area. The things are old, far older than the Ronkan ruins, but even with a sharp blade you can't even scratch the walls. Even with Yshtola's eyes, she can't determine what the buildings are made of, and she's starting to think that the reason Emet-Selch came here is because the place is his hometown. His actual hometown from before the Sundering. Some of the structures from the original world may have survived, and when you find one that was painted on the walls of the Ronkan ruins, it's the final bit of confirmation that you need. The buildings are part of a city that the Ascians lived in before the war between Hydaelyn and Zodiark destroyed them. But while you know Emmett is down there, you still need the Ondo to point you in the right direction, so you go to find out what more you can do to help build trust with the natives. The Ondo had planned on lighting up their walls as a return signal to let the one who lit the light in the distance know that they're there. They have a surface dweller craftsman who lives down there who's supposed to be making something that can glow brightly enough to light up the wall, but they haven't heard from him. If you go and get their lamp, then there will be no doubts that you're there to help them. The smith's name is Grendold, and his shop is to the south, so you head off. When you see the guy, minus the hair, he literally looks and acts exactly like your Geralt. The man had gone to the depths of the ocean to focus on his craft without distractions. I'm assuming one of those distractions was breathing, because until recently there was water everywhere. But not only has he not been able to relax, he has no inspiration, which is why he hasn't even started on the Ondo's lamp. He needs something to use as a guide to help him create something that gives off the right kind of special light the Ondo want. Something with the spark of life, caught in a crystal that dances with the emotions of its former bearer. That's oddly specific, and you just so happen to have the crystals from the fallen cardinal virtues, which you got in some stories that I've covered on this channel that you can go and check out. The crystal is exactly what he needs to get to work, and his ideas start to flow. Then he starts crafting. It doesn't take long for the man to make something really impressive, but even he doesn't know what the buildings the Ondo live in are made of. You take the lamp to the Ondo, although there's no way you should have been able to lift that thing, but showing up with it is all the proof the Ondo need to believe that you are the emissaries of the Ancients. They take the lamp to offer their prayers at the Wall of the Forgotten, and promise to tell you anything you want once they're done. While you wait, Ardbert shows up and he wants to know if the crystal you showed Grendold came from one of his friends. Despite the fact that he pops up at will, he did give you some privacy, and he wants to know where you got the crystals. So you tell him of your hunts for the cardinal virtues. Hearing how you granted his friends peace after their deaths makes him even more glad to be there with you. After your talk, the Scions show up, and it seems like Yshtola's filled them in about the place being an Ascian homeland, which pretty much removes all doubt that Emet-Selch was telling you the truth about the world, the Sundering, and his reasons for wanting the Rejoining. Alisaie thinks the dream of rejoining the world is pointless because it won't bring back the people that Emmett lost, but she doesn't know if she wouldn't be doing the same thing if she were him. She's also wrong, at least to some extent. The unsundered Ascians can actually restore the memories of other Ascians, so rejoining the worlds and the souls of the people, then putting their memories back, would bring them back to who they were. I'm also pretty certain that's what Emmett had planned for you once you showed up to the Tempest on the verge of death. The Ondo finish their ritual and are more than willing to point you in the direction of the illuminated land, which is in fact an entire underwater city. But it's not a city like any you've ever seen. Ether flows through every building and structure because the entire place was created by a spell that Emmett cast. So now you and the Scions head into the underwater city to face down the Ascian who made the entire place with his mind. The city that Emet-Selch created is so big that it makes Alphinaud feel like a pixie as you all stand in front of the elevator leading to the lower floors. The odd size is the least weird part of this whole experience, however. The door actually speaks to you and calls you by name, welcoming you to Amarat. But Emmett did invite you to the place, so it only makes sense that the doors would open for you. Which is good, because if the elevator hadn't worked, it would have been a long fall to reach the ground floor. The entire place seems peaceful enough, but the size of the buildings makes you all feel really, really small. But not as small as the giant robed person who's standing a little ways away makes you feel. Even though the figure could squash you by accident, Alphinaud figures that the best way to find out some information is to talk to it. The rest of the Scions follow him just in case the giant is hostile. It's actually pretty friendly, and he sees you all as children in cute costumes. He speaks in a language that you've never heard before, but you all understand it anyway, and he's more than willing to answer some of your questions, which are mostly about the city. Right now, you and the Scions are in the district where most of the institutions are that manage the planet's most vital functions. When you ask who rules the place, the giant is confused because they don't have a solitary ruler. They do have a convocation of 14, which makes the major decisions for the people and the planet. Emet-Selch is a part of that group, and at the moment they're in the process of putting their final plan together to stop the final days, which is getting closer. Which means none of you will be able to get an audience with Emmet at the moment, so the giant tells you all to go home before your parents start to worry. He even offers to take you, an offer that you decline. The whole exchange was weird, but Y'shtola can see that, like the city, Emmet made the people too. With the giant mentioning the final days like it's about to happen right now, it makes Urianger think that the city and all of its inhabitants are recreations of Amarot in the short time right before the disaster. The fact that Emmet wanted you to come to his recreated city and summoned his people with the minds to talk to you means that you can use them to find out some much needed information about the convocation, the final days, and of course Emmet's location. So you all split up to question the giant robed Amoritine. They really are all eager to talk, like Emmet wanted you to learn about his people's past. The Convocation of 14 is made up of 14 of the wisest people. They make all of the major life-altering decisions for the people, and they have some members whose names you might recognize, like La Habrea, Elidibus, Logrif, Matron, and of course Emet-Selch. However, there seems to be some type of dispute within the group, and they may be losing a member soon, something that's never happened before, which is a sign of how stressful the current situation actually is. But the regular people aren't worried. They trust the Convocation will save them. But even they don't know what's causing the final days. A loud sound randomly comes from within the planet and starts to distort all the living things around it, causing them to lose control of their creation magic. When that happens, every negative emotion that they have is given form, and fire falls from the sky and monsters appear, destroying everything. They haven't found the source of the problem. It's almost like the planet itself has gotten sick. Right now it's only happening across the sea, but it will definitely spread to Amarot too, and that'll be the end of everything. The only hope they have is for the Convocation to go through with their plan to give the planet a will of its own, creating a being of great power and changing the very laws of existence. The other Scions learned a little bit too, although Alisaie hated being treated like a child. She didn't like it when she was one, so she really hates it now, even though she's still pretty much the size of one. The others had conversations similar to yours, talking about creation magic running wild, the final days, and the Convocation. The really interesting thing is the Amoritine's creation magic. They can make anything they think of real. All they need is a clear desire, some focus, and boom, stuff pops into existence. That sounds very similar to how primals are summoned on the Source. The difference is the Amoritine have massive amounts of ether in their own bodies, which lets them do creation magic without any outside tools, like crystals or ether from the land. The place is fascinating, and the stuff the Warrior of Light is learning is really cool, but she is dying and none of your searching has gotten you any closer to Emet-Selch. But he's a part of the Convocation, and they're in the Capitol building, so he should be there. But when Thancred tried to go in, they turned him away because he didn't have permission to enter. However, the place seems to know you, so if you talk to the right person, you may be able to get them to open the doors for you all. The Bureau of Administrations is the place you have to go to ask for permission, so while you do that, the others will keep looking around, both for a cure for you and a way to sneak into the Capitol just in case you can't get the doors open. At the Bureau, your name is in fact on their approval list, so they will happily write out a visitor's pass for you. It won't be done for a while, so you have to sit and wait. Immortal beings really don't have a good grasp of time, so there's no telling how long you'll have to sit there. Honestly, anyone who's ever been to the DMV knows that mortals don't have a good grasp of time either. While you sit there, in pain from the light inside of you trying to eat its way out, an Amoritine named Hyphlodeus sits beside you. Unlike the others, he knows that you're from a different time than him, and he knows that he's an illusion. He thinks Emet-Selch may have made him more aware than the others because in the old days they were really good friends. But there's still not much he can do besides talk, and he tells you about what happened when the final days actually hit. The Convocation had lost a member by that time, and the 13 that remained made the decision to summon Zodiark. But to do it took a large amount of power, so nearly half of their people gave their lives to fuel the summoning. And it worked. Zodiark was made and the destruction was stopped. But the planet was devastated already. A lot of species were wiped out entirely, the water was poisoned, the land uninhabitable in most places, and even the wind had stopped blowing. So another half of their people gave their lives to give Zodiark the power to heal the planet. That worked too, and so the Convocation started working on its next plan. They would nurture the world until it was once again overgrown with life. Then they would sacrifice some of the new life to Zodiark to give him the power to restore the people who used their souls to power him in the first place, letting everyone and everything return to the way it was before the final days ever happened. However, some of the Amoritine thought enough had been sacrificed to Zodiark, and the new world they made should be left alone to flourish. These people gave their lives to summon Hydaelyn to fight for their viewpoint, causing the Amora-Team to be divided for the first time, and leading to a war and the Sundering. Emet-Selch to this day is still fighting to finish that plan and restore his people, a burden he's been carrying practically by himself for millennia. And with what Hythlodaeus knows of his friend, it's probably been really bothering him. He has the fate of his entire race on his shoulders, which is a pretty heavy burden to carry. The story lasts long enough for your visitor pass to finally be done, so you tell Hythlodaeus bye, but he causes you to stop when he mentions the fact that he can see Ardbert walking next to you. He doesn't fully see him, but he can see the extra soul that you're carrying around. He's probably the only one who can see him, but the fact that you can see Ardbert is only natural, since before the Sundering you were one person. He can tell by the color of your souls. Sundered or not, those don't change. It's like your fingerprint. If someone chops off your finger, the print doesn't change. He's actually not surprised you ended up doing the things you've done in life, or that you ended up where you are, because he knows who you were before, and Emmett very likely does too, or at least he has an idea. Hythlodaeus calls you his new old friend, letting you know before he fades that like he and Emmett, you and him were good friends in the old world too. With your visitor's pass in hand, you head back to meet the others. You were gone for so long that Thancred thought you might need to be rescued, but the fact that you came with the means to get into the capital is good, because while there are no guards anywhere in the city, there was no way to break through Emmett's magic to get inside. Alisaie and Reen tried to find a cure for you, but the Amora-Team are really only able to talk about their issues. They're like very detailed automated messages, so they weren't really all that helpful. You of course had a far more interesting story to tell them, which lets the Scions understand that when Emmett told them that they didn't have a clue about what he really planned, they really didn't. If he completes the rejoining, he'll use the life energy of every survivor to restore things to how they were before. And there's still the matter of what he plans to do with the Exarch. A fight is coming, but Reen wants to see if there's another way, because you won't be able to hold back if you even want a small chance of taking down Emmett. And if you push yourself too hard, you'll become a Sin Eater. The Scions will stand by you whether you choose to fight or not, but everyone knows that you won't back down now. And despite all of the power that Reen got from Minfilia, she still feels scared and powerless. Even now, if you started to turn, she wouldn't know what to do to help you. You've all been there to help her when she needed it, and Minfilia even died to give her a life of her own, yet she still feels like a useless failure. She's been trying to follow your example, but she doesn't think she can do it. The stress is getting to her so much that Reen actually starts to cry. But she doesn't understand that if you've given your all to do something, you didn't hold back or skip steps, even if you fail, you have no reason to feel ashamed. You did all you could, and that's all you could do. If she wants to be like you, then she has to learn a lesson that a very good friend taught you. Fate can be cruel, but don't cry about it, because a smile better suits a hero. Taking your words to heart, Reen forces herself to smile, and you all head into the capital to confront Emet-Selch once and for all. Emet-Selch is not all that happy that you didn't follow his instructions to show up alone. He's not really happy that you haven't transformed yet either. Now that the Scions know the truth about his plans, he doesn't bother hiding the fact that once the rejoining is done, he'll kill every living thing on the source to restore his people. And the fact that the Exarch has unlocked the secret to traveling across the rift in time gives him a little more that he can use to complete his mission, so he's not giving the man back. It still bothers him that you all think he's wrong for throwing away your lives to save his people, but he thinks that's only because you're young. He's lived thousands of lives and done everything from raise children to die, and throughout all of that, the current crop of mortals proved unfit to take the place of his people as caretakers of the planet. And your contest with Vauthry and the Sin Eaters, mindlessly fighting while not thinking or planning for the potential disaster you could have been causing, is proof that none of you are ready either. If your people had to face the final days like his had, even the Scions have to admit that the people of your era would never willingly give up their lives to save the other half of their populace. And if you had seen everything he had, then you'd also agree that your people couldn't be trusted with the legacy of the Amora-Team. That doesn't mean the Scions won't fight, but the fact that Alphinaud compares your people to his really ticks Emmett off, and he decides to give you one final test. He recreates the end of Amarat and forces you to survive the final days. The scene is truly horrifying. Fire rains from the sky as the Amora-Team run for their lives from monsters even more terrifying than Voidsent, who are destroying their beautiful city. But you and the Scions cut your way through the wreckage and the beasts as the world is torn apart around you. As you reach the end and defeat a very terrifying creature, Emet-Selch appears. He's surprised you survived, but with a wave of his hand he yeets you all backwards. You may be champions among the lesser beings, but if he hit you with his full power, you wouldn't have a chance. Proof of just how great the gap between you and an Unsundered really is. That doesn't stop any of you from attacking in what has to be one of the best scenes in the entire game. One by one, with Alisaie leading the charge because she's more than willing to dive headfirst into death without thinking, the Scions attack, and fall without even damaging Emet-Selch's clothes. All the while, the Warrior of Light is struggling forward with his body being consumed by the light ether. The fight through Amarad pushed you hard enough to where your body is no longer able to contain the light, and each step you take is moving you closer and closer to the end. Reen tries to get to you to help, but Emet-Selch shoots her too, leaving you without any help as the light consumes you and your transformation begins. Or at least there's no one left to help that Emmet can see. You collapse and wake in a world surrounded by light with Ardbert standing next to you. He asks, if you had the strength to take another step, would you be able to save both of their worlds? The Warrior of Light gives him a look that clearly says, why are you asking me that stupid question? Because everyone knows that I could. So Ardbert hands him his axe and finally merges with the Warrior of Light, repairing his fractured soul, moving you one step closer to being unsundered and giving you the power to contain the light. The power bursts out of you, and Emet-Selch sees your true Ascian form, if only for a second. The only thing that would have made this moment cool is if he saw you wearing your mask, which would have been red, but we'll explain that later. But this was still a great moment, especially when you start to talk with Ardbert's voice. Still, you're not an Unsundered, and one-on-one, Emmet would kill you. But the Exarch, having perfected his technique, summons warriors from across time and space to join you in the fight. Since it's come down to this, Emet-Selch pulls out his full power and finally lets you know his name. He is Hades, and he's ready to kill you. Hades' power is insane. Even with the Blessing of Light, you can't beat him. But the Scions get a chance to recover while you fight, and Thancred impales the Ascian with shards of white auracite that the others start to pour their ether into. It's still not enough to take him down, but using all the light ether that you gathered during your trek across Novrant, the very ether that was killing you, you blow a hole through Hades, putting an end to Emet-Selch once and for all. As the Ascian dies, he asks you to do him a favor. He wants you to remember that his people once lived, because with his death, the hope of resurrecting his people is nearly gone. You agree to fulfill his dying request as the Ascian fades into oblivion. With the battle done, Y'shtola looks at you and can't believe that your ether is back to the way it used to be. She thinks that it's because you burned off all the light during the fight, but Reen can see more than her with the power of the Oracle of Light, and it wasn't just the ether that was your problem. The light had broken your very soul apart, but now it's fixed because of your merger with Ardbert, something that you promised to explain to them later. The Exarch is a little uncomfortable since he has a lot of explaining and apologizing to do, but that can wait until you're all back out of there because you all deserve a break. Considering how bad the Exarch looks, he may need one even more than you do. On the surface, a lot of Eulmorans, including the Chais, have gathered under the restored sky to look for you all, and one of them spots you on the beach. Apparently you all had to swim back, something that drains Alphinaud so much that he passes out. And despite Alisaie's attempts to wake him by shaking him, which are probably hurting him worse since his face is sliding back and forth on the ground, he won't wake up. Urianger is apparently lost somewhere out at sea. The whole not being able to swim thing probably had something to do with that. But while Reen's worried about him, Thancred and Y'shtola figures that he'll wash up sooner or later. Novrant has been saved. The light ether is gone, the sky's back to normal, and you all return to the Crystarium to celebrate your victory over the light. And with his soul inside of you, Ardbert finally gets to come home as the hero who saved his world. Because if he hadn't been there, this part of the story would not have had a happy ending. This concludes the first part of the Shadowbringers main scenario questline. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ding that notification bell. And if you want to buy me a coffee for my work, sign up to become a member of the channel. I also want to give out a special shout out to Alex Mukala and Husky by the Geek, who made that incredible track that you guys hear in the background. I've got a link to the video in the description, and you should really check them out because these guys are incredibly talented. So until next time guys, later.